Seated in his carriage as it departed from the skyport, Joshi brooded over how he could humiliate Rocky upon their meeting. The very thought of it was the only thing that could ease his frustration. Yet, amid his scheming, his mind drifted to Aileen. The mere thought of her was enough to lighten his mood. Despite having met Aileen only a handful of times, and those encounters occurring months ago, she still lingered in his thoughts, making his heart itch with anticipation. It was hardly surprising. Aileen, the finance officer of Thunderhawk City, was merely 17 or 18 years old, a young woman brimming with potential. Hailing from nobility, she exuded both elegance and spirit, making her incredibly alluring. Thinking of her, Joshi pushed aside his grievances with Rocky. His new focus was clear. This time, he would find a way to win Aileen over. Previously, he had attempted to do just that, only for Rocky to interfere and deny him the opportunity. Joshi refused to believe that Rocky, as City Lord, was oblivious to his intentions. No, it was far more likely that Rocky was feigning ignorance, perhaps because he had already claimed Aileen for himself and couldn't bear to part with her. In high society, such matters were commonplace, but that only intensified Joshi's desire. To possess Aileen would not just be pleasurable, it would be a statement. She was the City Lord's woman, after all, and taking her for himself would bring him immense satisfaction. Although Joshi held the title of chief within the Azure Commerce Guild, he was one among dozens. His rank, no matter how prominent, would never compare to the authority of a City Lord. But if he could claim Rocky's woman, it would certainly elevate his status in his own eyes. Impatiently, he shifted in his seat. "Why haven't we arrived yet?" he muttered, realizing his throat was dry from all his fantasies. The route from Skyport to the City Lord's mansion wasn't long, but the journey seemed endless. Something felt off. Frowning, he peeked out the window, only to be stunned by what he saw. The carriage was moving through Thunderhawk City's bustling district instead of heading toward the mansion. "Hey, what's going on? Why are we in the city district?" he snapped, leaning out the window. "The road from Skyport to the City Lord's mansion is under repair, sir. We had to take a detour through the city." "Don't worry, we'll be there soon," the driver explained, flicking the reins to speed up slightly. "Damn it," Joshi grumbled, sinking back into his seat. He cursed Thunderhawk City, Rocky, and everyone responsible for this inconvenience. Over an hour later, when he finally arrived at the City Lord's mansion, he felt stiff from sitting so long. Yet, to his frustration, neither Rocky nor Aileen was there to greet him. Instead, a maid led him to the City Lord's hall, where he found himself completely alone. "Where is your City Lord?" he demanded. "The City Lord is attending to urgent matters. Please wait a moment," the maid replied with a polite smile before disappearing. Moments later, another servant arrived with tea and snacks, leaving Joshi with no choice but to wait. And wait he did for another agonizing hour. Eventually, the same maid returned, only to inform him that Rocky's matters were still unresolved. He wouldn't be able to meet Joshi until the next day. Joshi was livid. His entire day had been wasted. But what could he do? He couldn't very well take his anger out on a mere maid. With no other options, he stormed out of the mansion, boarded another carriage, and endured yet another meandering journey through the city before finally returning to his merchant ship at Skyport. He had arrived in Thunderhawk City that morning, yet by the time he returned, the sun had set. Hours wasted, wandering the city twice, accomplishing nothing, and not even catching a glimpse of Rocky or Aileen. Seething with rage, Joshi vowed that he would not seek Rocky out again. If the City Lord wanted to meet, he would have to come personally. But the next day, Rocky never came. Neither did Aileen. Joshi spent the entire day waiting aboard his ship, growing increasingly frustrated as time slipped away. By nightfall, his patience had worn thin. He swore to himself that unless Rocky personally apologized, he wouldn't step foot in the City Lord's mansion again. He wanted to see who would hold out longer, Rocky, who had an entire city to govern, or himself. However, 3 days later, Joshi found himself right back in a carriage, begrudgingly heading to the City Lord's mansion once again. For 3 days, Rocky had made no move to acknowledge his presence. No summons, no letters, no messengers, just complete silence. Joshi had been left waiting in vain. achieving absolutely nothing. In the end, he had no choice but to swallow his pride. He wasn't here to play games. He had come to Thunderhawk City for business. If he continued his standoff, the deal he sought might never come to fruition. So, after cursing Rocky 1,000 times over in his heart, Joshi climbed into the carriage, endured another slow ride through the city, and made his way to the mansion. Meanwhile, Rocky sat comfortably in his study, sipping tea while conversing with Lilia. These past few days had been anything but idle. Rocky had been occupied with turning a batch of equipment into rune gear, personally inscribing hundreds of runes each day. The work was exhausting, so much so that Lilia had insisted he rest at least 2 hours daily. Otherwise, she refused to let him enter the study. "How is the Guard Corps adjusting to Monty's training?" Rocky asked, setting down his teacup. "Monty's regimen is rigorous, so they're struggling to adapt. However, the promise of magic energy equipment for top performers has motivated them greatly. There haven't been any major issues," Lilia reported. "Good. Just make sure Monty doesn't push too hard. If he breeds resentment, it'll be difficult for him to maintain control." Lilia nodded. "You should visit them in a few days. A personal visit from the city lord would boost morale." "Not a bad idea," Rocky mused before agreeing. Lilia suddenly glanced out the window. "By the way, I think I just saw Joshi outside." Rocky raised an eyebrow. "Oh, he came today?" "Yes, he's been waiting in the city lord's hall." Rocky smirked and lifted his teacup. "Let him wait. I'm very busy." 3 days later, as promised, Rocky took a day off to inspect the Guard Corps in Thunderhawk City. The guard camp was located on the outskirts of the urban district, far from the city lord's mansion, primarily for security reasons. Although Rocky departed early in the morning, by the time his carriage reached the camp, it was already past 10. Upon arrival, Lilia promptly escorted him to the training grounds. Since Monty had taken over as instructor, all guards not assigned to city patrol were subjected to rigorous training from dawn till dusk. Before Rocky even saw the training grounds, he could hear Monty's voice booming across the camp. "Run faster. Did you skip breakfast? Hurry up. If anyone lags behind, the whole unit runs extra laps." Following the commotion, Rocky soon spotted Monty, the burly beast man, standing in the center of the field, shirtless and wielding a teaching whip. He barked orders like a ruthless taskmaster, his presence imposing. The guards, clad only in sweat-drenched trousers, were running laps in tight formation, their glistening bodies reflecting the sun's harsh rays. "Hey, isn't that the city lord?" "What? Where? Let me see." As Rocky and Lilia approached, murmurs spread through the ranks. It was rare for Thunderhawk City's citizens to see their leader in person. His status made him an almost mythical figure, spoken of but seldom encountered. Few guards had ever laid eyes on Rocky. Aside from those stationed at Skyport, most had only heard rumors, many stemming from Captain Ayer's tenure. Ayer had once described Rocky as an incompetent figure who had stumbled into power through sheer luck. There had been some truth to those words, at least in the past. However, when Ayer and Administrative Officer Parolo were exiled, and Rocky revealed his void magic armor, perceptions shifted dramatically. The revelation that he and Captain Lilia had ventured into the wilderness to hunt demons only cemented his newfound reputation. No one dared call him a loser anymore. But despite this change in sentiment, he remained an enigma. They had heard his name, witnessed his rise, yet they still had no concrete understanding of the man himself. That was why his presence in the camp stirred such excitement. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Monty's voice cracked like a whip. "Who told you to stop?" The guards, momentarily frozen in awe, snapped to attention as Monty advanced. "The city lord is here to inspect your training, and you dare slack off? Are you trying to humiliate me?" Monty raised the teaching whip menacingly, and the guards, fearful of punishment, scrambled back onto the track, running harder than before. "City lord," Monty greeted Rocky as he approached, his usual grin in place. Rocky eyed him with mild curiosity. "How's the arm?" Monty flexed his half-severed limb with ease. "The bandage is long gone." "Fully healed, my lord." Satisfied, Rocky turned his attention back to the guards. "How are they doing?" "Not bad." Monty nodded. watching them run. They started with weak foundations, but with proper training, they'll be fit for battle. Some even show real promise. With the right guidance, they could achieve great things. Good to hear? Rocky nodded. He had high hopes for the Guard Corps. Thunderhawk City was growing rapidly, and in time, its defensive forces would need to grow alongside it. Today's guards would become the backbone of tomorrow's military. Rocky cast Monty a knowing glance. Train them well, but don't push too hard. I don't want them breaking under the pressure. Though he had only seen Monty's methods for a few minutes, he could already tell the training regimen was brutal. While toughness was necessary, excessive cruelty could break men instead of forging them. Monty grinned and thumped his chest. Don't worry, my lord. I know my limits. With that, he turned back to the training grounds, bellowing at the recruits once more as he cracked his whip in the air. Rocky watched for a moment, then smirked, sipping his tea as he observed his growing army.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Rocky stayed with the Guard Corps until the afternoon before he returned to the city lord's mansion, and he was very pleased when he left. He had spent almost the entire day with the guards and witnessed their whole day of training. It must be said that although Monty's training was somewhat harsh, it was incredibly systematic. After running, came a series of physical exercises, and after lunch, they moved on to group combat practice. Monty had arranged each training segment very appropriately. For the guards, even though the training was arduous and even painful, it brought significant benefits, especially since they would soon be accompanying Rocky to the land to complete a series of missions assigned by the Mercenary Guild. In such cases, intensive training became a necessity, and it was the only way the guards could survive the battles against the demons. Seeing how hard the guards worked, Rocky did not dare slack off himself. So, upon returning, he went straight into the workshop and began to inscribe runes on one piece of equipment after another, working until late into the night. Late at night, after a busy day, Rocky finally returned to his bedroom. Even then, he didn't rest immediately. Although he lay in bed, he took out the demon's fong he had bought earlier. Holding the demon's fong in his hand and continuously fiddling with it, Rocky examined its patterns while carefully feeling it, almost unable to let it go. He indeed liked the demon's fong very much. Although he didn't know which demon it had come from, Rocky was fond of it to the extent that he had bought it for experimentation, but had not yet inscribed even a single rune on it after so much time. Because Rocky was somewhat reluctant, he did not want to waste the demon's fong in haste. He wanted to wait until he could make it into a dagger, then it wouldn't be too late to inscribe runes on it. Moreover, if given enhancement, he even considered inscribing a second-level rune directly on it. It was because of this idea that he played with the demon's fong every night before sleep, carefully feeling it and becoming familiar with it so that he would be more proficient when he actually began to inscribe runes on it. Thus, Rocky played with the demon's fong for quite a while before preparing to sleep. However, just as he had lain down and before he could even close his eyes, something unexpected happened. Rocky suddenly felt his magic power stir inexplicably within him. This is a breakthrough? Feeling the agitation of his magic power, the just lying down Rocky quickly sat up, and a look of joy appeared on his face. Although he was only a first-level mage and didn't know too much about magic power, he at least knew that such sudden agitation typically indicated a breakthrough, which meant he was about to become a level 2 mage. This was definitely an unexpected surprise, but it did not surprise Rocky. That was because Lilia had once said that the best way to achieve continuous breakthroughs in magic power was to use it continuously and preferably to exhaust it every time. Every time the magic power was exhausted and subsequently recovered, it would increase a bit on its existing basis. Over time, this would naturally push the magic power beyond its previous limits. Since learning the mana rune, Rocky's magic power had often been depleted because of his frequent inscription of runes, especially in recent days when he had inscribed hundreds of runes on several pieces of equipment every day until his magic power was exhausted. Perhaps it was this high-intensity consumption that had caused Rocky's magic power to break through. Realizing that he was about to break through, Rocky quickly sat up from the bed. then focused his mind and began to consciously control the magic power within him. He had to do this because magic power became extremely unstable during a breakthrough. One had to actively control it to stabilize it, otherwise the uncontrolled magic power could easily rebound and injure Rocky. However, this task was easier said than done. Though Rocky tried hard to suppress his magic power and calm it down, the more he actively suppressed it, the more obvious the resistance within his body became, until eventually he could not suppress it at all. Why is this happening? Time and again, he tried to control the magic power within him, but to no avail, causing Rocky to furrow his brows in frustration. This situation was clearly not normal. He had already spent a long time drawing runes, and there should have been hardly any magic power left in his body. How could he possibly be unable to control such a small amount of magic power? However, the impossible had happened. The scant amount of magic power remaining in his body not only became difficult to control, but also grew increasingly agitated, to the point where even Rocky could hardly bear it any longer. This was troublesome. Being just a first-level mage, Rocky had little knowledge of magic power and encountered a situation he had never heard of before, making him unsure of what to do. Although he panicked, the magic power inside his body continued to churn violently, and what Rocky couldn't see was that his skin had already turned an intense red. It felt as if fierce flames were burning beneath his skin, scorching him so intensely that he felt he might explode at any moment. This made Rocky immediately realize the gravity of the situation and hurriedly tried to find Lilia for help, fearing something disastrous would happen. No sooner had he risen from his bed than he collapsed weakly onto the floor with a thud. Somebody. Lying on the floor, Rocky struggled to open his mouth, but he could only make a very faint sound. When he tried to crawl toward the door, he found he couldn't muster any strength at all. Why was this happening? What was this situation? Powerless. Lying on the floor, Rocky wanted to shout but couldn't make a sound, wanted to crawl to the door but couldn't exert any force, causing him to completely break down. He even thought he might just die in such a bewildered state. But just then, just when Rocky really might have perished confusedly in his room, there was a clattering sound as the demon's fong, which he had carelessly placed on the bedside, fell to the ground. Before the powerless and helpless gaze of Rocky, the demon's fong that had fallen to the ground seemed to be drawn by some attraction, rolling toward him until it stopped by his side. N/O/vel/B/forward C//om. Immediately after, a tremendous suction emerged from the demon's fong, suddenly enveloping Rocky's whole body, and sucked away all the agitated magic power inside him. The demon's fong that rolled to Rocky's side instantly sucked away all the magic power about to explode within him, leaving him completely drained. Once his magic was empty, Rocky, who had been lying on the ground unable to move or cry out, felt as light as a feather, as if all his burdens had vanished along with the magic power. Shortly after, he slowly got to his feet. After he rose from the ground, he gasped for breath several times, then realized that his entire body was soaked with sweat, almost as if he had taken a bath with his clothes on. But at the same time, he had also become a level 2 mage. After the perilous experience just now, he had successfully leveled up to a level 2 mage. However, after the breakthrough, Rocky did not seem very happy. Instead, he was more concerned about something else, so he hastily picked up the demon's fong from the ground as soon as he stood up. What on earth just happened? Picking up the demon's fong and inspecting it, Rocky couldn't help but think about the recent events and feel a sense of fear. After careful recollection, he understood that something must have gone wrong during his breakthrough, causing the magic power in his body to riot and nearly costing him his life. If not for the miraculous performance of the demon's fong in his hand, he would probably have died without understanding how NOVL be \JNN. But why would this mysterious demon's fong suck away all his magic power? Looking down at the demon's fong in his hand, Rocky was utterly perplexed. His knowledge about the demon's fong he had purchased was actually very limited. He didn't even know which high-level demon the tooth came from. But now it seemed that this tooth was anything but ordinary. Could it be a treasure? With that thought, he brought the demon's fang closer for a detailed examination, hoping to detect some clues. But just then, there was a crisp cracking noise, and Rocky found that a crack had appeared on the demon's fang he held, followed by the crack spreading across the entire tooth, causing it to show a web of large fissures. It's cracked? Cracked! Watching the demon's fang in his hand cracking into pieces, Rocky was stunned on the spot. Was it just breaking apart like this? No, the demon's fang had not fallen to pieces. Though its surface cracked all over, it was only shedding its outer layer. After the fragments had peeled off, the true form of the demon's fang was revealed. Now significantly smaller than before, the demon's fang had shrunk to the size of a palm. More importantly, the tooth became as clear and sparkling as crystal, emitting a faint blue light, looking just like an exquisitely carved piece of art, stunning in its beauty. As he saw the demon's fang transform before his eyes, Rocky couldn't help but widen his own, his face a mixture of disbelief and utter confusion. Was this the true form of the demon's fang? Loading at the artistic demon's fang in his hand, the only thing on his mind was what exactly had he bought? This item might indeed be a demon's fang, but it was clearly not from any ordinary demon. Fantastic! Realizing the extraordinary nature of the demon's fang, Rocky yelled out in excitement. It was obvious that he had stumbled upon a treasure, but perhaps due to the overwhelming excitement, he unintentionally waved his arm, and as he did, his arm clutched in his hand shot out a beam of blue light. Right after, there was a thunderous boom, and a huge hole was blasted in the bedroom wall. This outcome caused the jubilant Rocky to suddenly freeze, staring blankly at the hole blasted in the wall, completely dumbfounded. To think such a thing happened? Are you injured? Lilia looked at Rocky with an anxious face, full of concern. I'm fine. He waved his hand at her to show that he was not seriously harmed, then asked, What do you all make of this? What exactly is this thing? As he spoke, he took out the demon's fang, which had become crystal-like, and then turned his gaze to Lilia, Aline, and Monty. It was now early in the morning of the next day. After the events of last night, Rocky had called Lilia and the others to the city lord's mansion first thing in the morning and recounted his experiences from the previous night. After hearing his story, all three of them were stunned. None had expected that Rocky had encountered such a dangerous situation the night before. The most worried, naturally, was Lilia. Even when Rocky took the demon's fang in his hand to show her, she snatched it away and threw it aside. This thing is too dangerous. Don't hold on to it. Watching the demon's fang being discarded like trash, Rocky was somewhat dumbfounded, but fortunately, Monty went over and picked it up. My lord, are you saying this tooth absorbed all your magic powers? After picking the demon's fang back up, Monty looked at it and asked. That's right. Rocky nodded confidently. At that moment, Aline and Lilia also gathered around Monty, and the three of them carefully examined the strange tooth together. After studying it for a while, Lilia finally said, This thing looks quite dangerous. At the same time, Aline also spoke. This thing looks quite valuable. The two women examined the demon's fang from all angles, each expressing her own thoughts. Clearly, their thoughts were very much in line with their personalities, and both were correct. The unidentifiable demon's fang was indeed dangerous. If anyone doubted it, they only needed to look at the gaping hole in the wall of Rocky's bedroom. At the same time, the demon's fang was, as Aline said, likely worth a good deal of money. Even setting aside its potential powers, its appearance alone, like that of a piece of fine art, would fetch a high price on the market. Unfortunately, although their thoughts were not wrong, they were of no practical use. Therefore, Rocky turned to Monty, who had been silent this entire time. As a former demon hunter, even if Monty could not recognize which high-level demon the tooth came from, he should at least be able to make a rough judgment, right? Indeed, after an even more meticulous study than anyone else had undertaken, Monty finally raised his head slowly and, while handing the demon's fang back to Rocky, said solemnly, Congratulations, my lord. Caught off guard by the unexpected remark, Rocky was taken aback, not quite understanding. Mani then continued, "My lord, if I'm not mistaken, this should be a tooth from a high-level demon. My lord, if I'm not mistaken, this demon's fang likely comes from a high-level demon," Mani said as he handed the demon's fang back to Rocky. As these words left his mouth, everyone present, including Rocky, was shocked, and in the next second, their gazes uniformly fixated on the demon's fang in Rocky's hand. This demon's fang, could it actually be from a high-level demon? The conclusion was so frightening that everyone was stunned for a long time before Rocky, after taking a deep breath, asked Mani, how did you figure it out? If this demon's fang truly were from a high-level demon, then it would definitely be considered a treasure, possibly even more valuable than Rocky's set of void magic armor. But this was contingent on Mani not being mistaken, otherwise a big misunderstanding could occur. I believe I have not mistaken it. However, in response to Rocky's inquiry, Mani confidently stated, "My lord, although I have never actually hunted a high-level demon, I have seen some items from high-level demons at the demon exchange, so I do have some understanding of them. Although there are only high-level and low-level categories for demons, the gap between these two levels is immense. Hence, any item from a high-level demon, whether it be teeth, horns, or skin, is fundamentally different from those of low-level demons. This difference stems from their essence. Take this tooth, for example. It is clearly a demon's fang, yet it can absorb magic power. Just from this point alone, we can prove it definitely doesn't come from a low-level demon, since even the most powerful low-level demon doesn't possess such an ability. And even if they did, the ability would vanish after their death. But that's not the case with high-level demons. High-level demons are all terrifying beings with immense strength, and almost all of them have special abilities that usually remain after their deaths, just like this tooth. This is also why the market value of high-level demons is far greater than that of low-level demons, by over tenfold. So that's how it is. After Mani's explanation, Rocky and the others finally understood the situation and felt that what Mani said made a lot of sense. They had recently visited the demon exchange, and though they only browsed the first 3 floors, they indeed did not see any items from low-level demons that had any special abilities. It appeared that, as Mani mentioned, only items from high-level demons possessed special abilities. Low-level demons did not. If that was the case, then the demon's fang that Rocky had acquired could indeed be from a high-level demon. With this realization, Rocky had struck it rich. You must know that he had purchased this demon's fang for only 500 gold coins, a price that was already quite cheap. And if the demon's fang truly came from a high-level demon, then Rocky would have made a fortune. This is truly great. And if it really is as such, I must thoroughly investigate what special ability this tooth possesses. Upon learning that the demon's fang in his hand might come from a high-level demon, Rocky grew even more attached to it and immediately planned to investigate it further. He now knew that the demon's fang could absorb magic power, but he was still unclear about the specific effects and the precise conditions for activation, among other things, knowledge that was essential for maximizing the use of the tooth. Afterward, Aileen and Monty both left the City Lord's mansion, while only Lilia stayed behind. No choice, seeing Rocky's excited expression, Lilia knew he was definitely going to do something reckless again. So she had no choice but to stay by his side to prevent another incident like last night. And to avoid unnecessary danger, the two of them went to the back garden of the City Lord's mansion, and for safety's sake, Rocky even put on his void magic armor, just in case any accidents occurred. In the back garden of the City Lord's mansion, Rocky and Lilia stood together, both looking at the demon's fang that Rocky held in his hand. This tooth, it seems like it can absorb mana. Holding the crystal-like demon's fang in his hand, Rocky felt it for a moment, but didn't feel the sucking force from yesterday, and his magic power wasn't being absorbed directly either. Try touching it with your magic power and see if there's any effect. Lilia reminded him from the side at this moment. Okay. Agreeing, Rocky mobilized the magic power inside his body, controlling it to surge towards the tooth in his hand. The moment they made contact, a huge suction force emerged from within the demon's fang, as if a giant maw instantaneously sucked all the magic power out of Rocky's body. No, it wasn't just the magic power within Rocky's body that was being drained. Even the magic power contained in the runes on his void magic armor was being sapped. All of this happened in the blink of an eye, so instantaneously that Rocky had no time to react. By the time he did react, the demon's fang he held in his hand was already emitting bursts of blue light, just as beautiful as it had been the night before. "Rocky, throw it away!" But at that moment, Lilia suddenly shouted and, without waiting for Rocky to react, kicked his hand. The force wasn't great, but it was enough to send the demon's fang flying from his grasp. It was exactly at the moment that Lilia's kick sent the tooth flying when a blue light suddenly shot out from the fang. In the blink of an eye, there was a thunderous explosion, and a large tree struck by the blue light was completely blasted into the air. The massive trunk flew for a while before crashing down heavily onto the ground, landing right in front of Rocky. The scene that occurred in the blink of an eye left both Rocky and Lilia stunned on the spot. Neither of them had expected such a result. What was this blue light that shot out from the demon's fang? It possessed such immense power that it exceeded even the might of a magic cannon. An Ovel, B//JNN. And if it weren't for Lilia's quick response in kicking the demon's fang away, the blue light might have exploded right in Rocky's hands, and the consequences of that were simply unimaginable. You have to understand that his void magic armor and the mana rune on it were already drained of mana. Without the support of mana, the void magic armor is just an ordinary suit of armor, unable to withstand an explosion of that magnitude. With a light clink, the demon's fang that had been kicked into the air now gently fell to the ground and, as if alive, rolled towards Rocky's feet. But at this moment, Rocky was already too scared to pick it up. This thing is too dangerous. Watching the demon's fang fall at his feet, Rocky didn't dare to pick it up right away because it was simply too dangerous. Only after a good while did he carefully bend over and gingerly picked up the demon's fang from the ground. And when he picked up the demon's fang, nothing happened. That's what made Rocky breathe a sigh of relief. Don't be afraid. The magic power absorbed by this thing must have been depleted. It should be safe now. Lilia looked at Rocky with a bit of amusement before approaching and glancing at the demon's fang in his hand. "Was the situation you encountered last night the same as just now?" "Yes, it was the same last night. In the blink of an eye, my bedroom was blasted, but the power was definitely not as strong as just now." Having confirmed that there was no danger, Rocky finally relaxed and then explained to Lilia, simultaneously glancing at the large tree that had been blown to his feet. He couldn't help feeling scared. If last night's explosion in his bedroom had been as powerful as the one just now, his bedroom would have been more than just a hole in the wall. The whole room would have been leveled. So, this demon's fang can not only absorb magic power, but also emit the absorbed magic power afterward. As Rocky was still feeling shocked, Lilia opened her mouth. Her words made sense, for the blue light shot out from the demon's fang was clearly mana, which meant that the demon's fang could not only absorb mana, but also release it exactly as it had absorbed an n/o/vel/b// and c//om. As for why the explosion was stronger than last night, it's actually quite simple. This time, the demon's fang had absorbed more mana. Last night, it had only absorbed Rocky's magic power, but just now, it had absorbed not only Rocky's magic power, but also the mana contained in the void magic armor and mana rune, which naturally made the emitted mana much more massive and the effect more astonishing. So that's how it is. After Lilia explained this, Rocky understood and then looked down and thought for a while. After quite some time, he looked up again and began to distance himself from Lilia while saying, "Lilia, attack me with magic." "What?" Lilia was slightly taken aback by this request, not understanding his intention. "I want to see if this tooth can absorb not only mana, but also magic." Mana, magic power, and magic, although named differently, are essentially the same force. The only difference is in their form of manifestation. So, if the demon's fang could absorb mana and magic power, could it also absorb magic that was transformed from magic power? Rocky really wanted to know, which is why he made such a request to Lilia. Lilia understood his reasoning after his explanation, and although hesitant, she eventually nodded. Beyond being a third-level warrior, Lilia was also a level 2 mage. Her control over magic power might not be exquisite, but was still decent. Following that, she took 2 steps back and then shot a magic bullet at Rocky. A magic bullet is a first-level magic that is half as powerful as the fireball technique. Even if it hit Rocky, it wouldn't cause much harm. Facing the magic bullet flying towards him, Rocky didn't dodge or flinch, but instead raised the demon's fang in his hand. In the blink of an eye, there was a loud bang, and Rocky was knocked back several steps by the magic bullet. "Are you okay?" Not expecting Rocky to actually be hit by the magic bullet, Lilia rushed over and then saw that he was not seriously hurt. The magic bullet had just hit his breastplate. "Can't this thing absorb magic?" Seeing that Rocky was all right, Lilia glanced at the demon's fang in his hand. "No, I didn't aim it properly." Shaking his head at Lilia, Rocky's expression was somewhat embarrassed. It wasn't that the demon's fang hadn't absorbed the magic bullet. It was because he hadn't aimed the demon's fang at the magic bullet correctly, so he was hit. "Let's do it one more time." Rolling her eyes at Rocky, Lilia walked farther away than before because the greater the distance, the longer the trajectory of the magic bullet, and the more reaction time Rocky naturally had. In this manner, Rocky and Lilia started to experiment with the demon's fang in various ways in the back garden of the city lord's mansion. Several days passed in the blink of an eye, and during these days, the two of them spent every day in the back garden of the city lord's mansion. They came up with all sorts of ways to tinker with the demon's fang, feeling as though they had both turned into mischievous children. However, it was because of their relentless experimentation that they finally managed to understand the effects of the demon's fang thoroughly. The demon's fang displayed several characteristics. First, the demon's fang could indeed absorb mana, magic power, and even magic itself. The specific upper limit of its absorption remained unknown. Second, whether it was mana, magic power, or various types of magic absorbed by the demon's fang, it would all be converted into pure energy and stored within the demon's fang. Third, the energy converted by the demon's fang was highly unstable. Even a slight vibration, or a mere touch, would cause the demon's fang to release the accumulated energy all at once without reservation. Fourth, and most importantly, the demon's fang could only absorb energy with which it came into direct contact. Otherwise, it had no effect whatsoever. These 4 findings were the result of Rocky and Lilia's several days of consecutive experimentation and personal experiences. Not only did they clarify the effects of the demon's fang, but they also gave Rocky new ideas about its potential uses. At first, he intended to craft it into a rune dagger, but now it seemed impossible. Because the demon's fang could absorb all mana it came into contact with, it was impossible to inscribe runes on it. If one tried to activate the runes, the demon's fang would absorb all the mana contained within the runes, even the user's mana, rendering it unusable as a rune weapon. Although his initial idea was no longer feasible, Rocky had come up with another method to utilize the demon's fang. He thought of using it as a defensive measure, relying on its ability to absorb energy to fend off magic or magic energy attacks. If used this way, wouldn't the demon's fang become a top-tier defensive item? This new idea made him decide to embed the demon's fang into his own void magic armor. By doing so, his void magic armor would have a powerful defensive measure against magic or mana attacks, wouldn't it? Of course, he couldn't implement this idea right away, as he had been too busy recently. Besides, this kind of modification wasn't easy to achieve, especially figuring out how to allow the demon's fang to function without absorbing the mana of the void magic armor itself, which Rocky hadn't yet found a solution to. Thus, he could only wait until he had time in the future to undertake this task. And in order to fully understand the effects of the demon's fang, Rocky had neglected several days' worth of work. After clarifying its effects, he busied himself trying to catch up on the progress of his enchanting work for equipment. Just as Rocky had begun to immerse himself in his primary duties, Aileen sought him out. "Sir, what do you plan to do about Jiashi?" "Who?" Holding the magic energy pen, Rocky looked up at Aileen in confusion and asked. "Jiashi, the overseer of the Azure Commerce Guild." Seeing the blank look on Rocky's face, Aileen had to remind him. Chapter Year. After her reminder, Rocky suddenly recalled the matter, and his eyes widened. He hasn't left yet? He hasn't? With a slight smile towards Rocky, Eileen cheerily updated him about Jiaxi's situation. Although neither she nor Rocky had seen Jiaxi during these past days, with Rocky even forgetting the incident, Eileen had not. She had been keeping a close watch on every move Jiaxi made. Whatever he did, Eileen knew all about it. Jiaxi had not been having a good time these days. No, it should be said he had been having a very bad time. He had already been in Thunderhawk City for over half a month, but he still had not met either Rocky or Eileen, a situation that was driving him to the brink of desperation. He had come to Thunderhawk City this time on behalf of the Azure Commerce Guild to conduct business. But how was he supposed to negotiate a deal when he couldn't even meet anyone? So these days had left him extremely anxious, and he had even stopped staying on the merchant ship, moving directly into the residential area of Thunderhawk City in order to be more accessible. After moving into Thunderhawk City, he practically ran to the City Lord's mansion every day, using every possible means in hopes of seeing Rocky as soon as possible. Over the course of half a month, he had been to the City Lord's mansion more than a dozen times. His previous pride had long vanished under such torment, making Rocky look bad. Eileen, none of those mattered to him anymore. Now he only had one thing on his mind, and that was to meet Rocky as soon as possible, conclude the trade, and then he never wanted to come to Thunderhawk City again. Alas, he could not even achieve this, as neither Rocky nor Eileen would see him. Even though he ran to the City Lord's mansion every day, each time he would be politely taken to the City Lord's hall, where after waiting for 2 to 3 hours, someone would come to tell him that the City Lord did not have time and asked him to return the next day. This lack of audience was driving Jiaxi mad. And let's not forget that he had not come alone this time. He was accompanied by no less than 5 ships full of grain. For every extra day Jiaxi stayed in Thunderhawk City, the grain on the merchant ships would also need to be stored for an additional day. While it is true that grains can be stored for a very long time, they can't last nearly as long in the dark, damp hold of a ship. If stored for a short time, it would be fine, but should it be too long and the grain begins to mold and spoil, then there would be real trouble. Thus, he was burning with impatience, yet had no solution. In fact, with Jiaxi's intelligence, he may not have realized it at first, but by now he had generally figured it out. He could guess that Rocky and Eileen were deliberately avoiding him and dragging their feet in not meeting him, and the reason was certainly due to the last trade deal. Chapter continue. In the initial days, although Jiaxi understood what was happening, he was still not ready to give up. He still wanted to stand up to Rocky, believing that as long as Rocky needed the grain in his possession, he would ultimately compromise, and Jiaxi would be the one to emerge victorious. But now he had changed his mind. He simply could not afford to wait any longer. After being ignored so many times, Jiaxi had completely given in. He had finally understood one thing, that he truly could not compete with the City Lord of Sky City, and he had genuinely relented. Once he had relented, Jiaxi's mind became more agile, and he soon turned to Voss. Voss and the Azure Commerce Guild had quite a good relationship. The reason the Azure Commerce Guild began doing business with Thunderhawk City was largely due to Voss's efforts as a liaison. And given that Voss had also once served as the finance officer within Thunderhawk City, Jiaxi felt that if he could get Voss to pass on a message or make an introduction, he would definitely be able to meet Rocky. And what pleased him to no end was that when he sought out Voss and explained his purpose, Voss readily agreed, promising that he would talk to Eileen. This delighted Jiaxi immensely. In his view, as long as he could meet Eileen, then everything would become much easier. So he not only thanked Voss profusely, but also presented him with a generous gift, then returned home, filled with expectation to wait for news. As for Voss, who had accepted a generous gift, he indeed kept his word and really did have a talk with Eileen. "Grandpa, didn't you say you wouldn't interfere with my affairs? Why have you gotten involved again? Tell me, did you accept a gift from that man?" Seeing that Voss had actually brought up Jiaxi, Eileen puffed up with anger. Leaving Jiaxi to fend for himself was a deliberate choice by her and Rocky, meant to discipline the overseer and make him realize who truly ruled over Thunderhawk City. So, regarding her grandfather's words, Eileen shook her head as vigorously as a rattledrum. firmly disagreeing. Aileen, you should meet with Joshi, Voss insisted. With a faint smile on his face, Voss explained to Aileen in a kindly manner. You and the city lord have been neglecting this matter for too long, which is really not good. What if you drive people to desperation and they end up leaving once and for all? How would you handle that? So, you should listen to Grandpa's advice. Go meet with Joshi, appease him properly, and let him calm down. Doing this will bring only benefits and no disadvantages. Having said that, Voss looked at Aileen, noticing that she was looking at him with a face full of surprise. It was not until a good while later that Aileen finally spoke. Grandpa, you're the craftiest. Giving Voss a thumbs up, Aileen had clearly understood what her grandfather meant. Nonsense. With his eyes wide, Voss put on an angry face, but Aileen was not the least bit scared. She quickly bounced away toward the exit, calling back, I got it, I'll see Joshi tomorrow. There's no need to rush. Wait 3 days before you meet him. Watching Aileen bounce away, Voss shook his head and reminded her. 3 days later, just as she had said, Aileen did indeed go to meet with Joshi. Upon seeing that Aileen had finally come, Joshi was overjoyed. The arrogance he had shown last time was gone, and he quickly apologized to Aileen right after meeting her, saying that he had offended her during the last encounter with the city lord and that he hadn't wanted to, but it was the Chamber of Commerce's orders and so on. In short, he said a lot of things to ingratiate himself. Of course, Aileen was well aware of such tricks. After all, how can one believe the words that come so easily from a merchant's mouth? However, she did not call him out on it. In fact, she did not show the slightest displeasure towards Joshi, but instead spoke to him earnestly. Overseer Joshi, to be frank, the city lord has been very dissatisfied after the last transaction, and he has not just once but multiple times requested that I seek cooperation with other chambers of commerce, Aileen said, her face a picture of helplessness. So, if it were not for me and Grandpa pleading on your behalf in front of the city lord, this deal might not have happened at all. NOVLB //JNN. Yes, I understand. I am very grateful to the Senior Voss and to Miss Aileen. I will certainly remember this favor. But regarding the current situation, like Aileen before him, Joshi did not believe a word she said, but he verbally agreed to everything nonetheless. Let's do this. I'll go speak with the city lord. As if she had made a great resolution, Aileen stood up while she spoke and then looked at Joshi. Overseer Joshi, please wait here. I'll go see the city lord right now, but you can't behave as you did last time. Otherwise, I really won't be able to help. Good, Miss Aileen. Rest assured I know what I should do. Seeing that Aileen was going to see Rocky right away, Joshi quickly thanked her, and a weight lifted from his heart. At this point, he didn't ask for anything more. Just to finish this transaction as soon as possible would be a blessing. After speaking with Aileen, Joshi courteously and respectfully saw her to her carriage, not daring to take any inappropriate actions or even harbor inappropriate thoughts throughout the process. While not exactly an upright person, Joshi, who seemed respectable on the surface, had done many underhand things in the shadows. However, he wasn't someone controlled by basal desires. He was very aware that he was asking Aileen for help, so he dared not entertain any improper thoughts or actions. One might wonder, was Joshi being too cautious? Since he already knew that Rocky was intentionally avoiding him, why then did he linger in Thunderhawk City? Why didn't he just leave? This thought was not wrong, but Joshi couldn't bring himself to do it because he had already missed the opportunity to leave. If he had wanted to leave during the first 3 days after arriving in Thunderhawk City, then leaving would have led to no loss, despite the failed negotiations. But now, having stayed in Thunderhawk City for over a month, if he were to leave dejectedly, the losses would be substantial. The entire 5 ships of grain he had brought were now exposed to the elements at the skyport. If he were to leave now, to whom would he sell this grain? If he couldn't sell this batch of grain, how would he explain it to the Chamber of Commerce? So, it wasn't that Joshi didn't want to leave. It was that he simply couldn't. He had to sell this batch of grain to Thunderhawk City. Otherwise, the trouble would be even greater. In such a situation, Joshi could only place his hopes on Aileen, hoping she could quickly convince Rocky and expedite the deal so he could leave. Moreover, Joshi had already decided that once this transaction was completed, he would swear never to come to Thunderhawk City again. However, while Joshi sat waiting for good news from Aileen with great anticipation, the carriage carrying Aileen headed straight to her training class. She didn't have time to specifically look for Rocky for Joshi's sake. She had many other matters to attend to. The training class had already been running for a month. Aileen went to check on the progress of the residents who had enrolled, which was truly what concerned her heart. On the other hand, Rocky in the City Lord's mansion was still buried in his study. After his extended efforts, the 100 shields bought from Eternal City had all been converted into runic shields, and the majority of the 100 pieces of armor had also been crafted into runic armor. That meant Rocky just needed to finish the last few pieces of armor to finally complete this major undertaking. In this situation, he was highly motivated, continuing to work hard despite extreme fatigue and many days without proper rest. Once this major project was completed, it would signify a fresh start. Soon, over half of the guards in Thunderhawk City would be equipped with the newly crafted runic equipment. Combined with Monty's intense recent training, the Guard Corps would undergo a revolutionary transformation in strength. With that, Rocky could then lead them to undertake missions from the Mercenary Guild. This was something Rocky had to do, as it directly concerned whether the treasury of Thunderhawk City could be replenished. Only with secured funding could he move to the next phase of development and planning. So, it was right for Aileen not to come to him. Rocky didn't have the time to deal with Joshi's predicament. His focus was entirely on crafting rune equipment. After another 4 or 5 days, Rocky finally inscribed runes on all the equipment he had purchased, transforming these imitation magic energy equipment into genuine rune equipment. The smooth completion of this major project brought Rocky a sense of relief. So much so that after drawing the final rune on the last piece of armor, he simply fell asleep in his study and slept for a whole day and night. The next day, he only woke up because he was too hungry. Otherwise, he might have slept even longer. No wonder, considering it had been over 2 months since Rocky returned from Eternal City, that many had been tirelessly working alone on the batch of rune equipment for 2 months, which explains why he fell asleep as soon as he finished the last piece of armor. However, for Rocky now, rest was always a luxurious indulgence. It was just the beginning of the development of Thunderhawk City, and there were too many tasks waiting for him to tackle. Therefore, after briefly resting for a day, he went to the Guard Corps with the newly crafted rune equipment. The equipment laboriously produced was intended for the guards, but due to Thunderhawk City's limited finances, only 100 guards could be equipped with the new gear. This meant that only half of Thunderhawk City's Guard Corps could don the new equipment. This was something Rocky had carefully considered beforehand. In fact, if he had chosen to purchase only shields or only armor, it would have sufficed for the entire Guard Corps. However, he did not do so. In Rocky's view, guards equipped with only one piece of rune equipment would see very limited improvement in strength. Rather than that, he preferred a strategy of fewer but finer, allowing a select few of the more capable guards to wear more powerful gear. This elite strategy proved more effective. Moreover, although most of the Guard Corps participated in tasks from the Mercenary Guild, not every member was required to fight tooth and nail, as Thunderhawk City had more than the Guard Corps. It also had 10 skyships. Skyships needed to be piloted, and the magic cannons on board also required operators. Thus, some of the guards were needed to pilot the skyships and operate the magic cannons. Given this, the actual number of guards required to fight alongside Rocky was not extensive. 100 sets of equipment sufficed to arm these guards. The guards, in fact, had already been informed of this. During their training, Monty had told them that the City Lord had acquired a batch of powerful magic energy equipment, but only the top 100 guards would have the privilege to wear this gear. That was precisely why, under Monty's grueling training, the guards were tremendously motivated. Everyone's goal was to be among the top 100 to receive the magic energy equipment prepared by the City Lord. Today, rather than training as usual on the parade ground, the soldiers stood in neat rows, as if they were ready for an inspection. In fact, they were indeed being inspected, for word had spread that the City Lord would bring 100 sets of magic energy equipment to evaluate their training results. From amongst them, the 100 most outstanding individuals would earn the reward of a magic energy shield and mana armor. At that moment, Rocky stood before these members of the Guard Corps, clad in void magic armor, radiating an imposing aura. Beside him stood Lilia and Aileen, and even Eileen's grandfather, Voss, was present. For this inspection, Rocky took it significantly seriously. He was not only dressed in full military regalia himself, but had also brought along all the notable figures of Thunderhawk City. Although the gathering was not large, it was indeed the grandest assembly within the city. The scenario made the guards extremely tense, as in their eyes, whether it was Rocky or Lilia, or even Aileen and Voss, these figures were immensely high and unreachable. All units, attention! N/O/vel/B//and.C//OM. Just as the guards were extremely nervous, Monty's voice, like rolling thunder, suddenly erupted. Following his command, the entire Guard Corps instantly stood up straight, chests out and eyes forward. Soon after, the neatly dressed Monty ran to the front of the formation and then loudly called out to Rocky, "City Lord! The Thunderhawk City Guard squad is ready for your inspection." Ready for the City Lord's inspection. As Monty's words fell, the guard squad behind him echoed in unison. Their voices booming, instantly reverberated across the entire parade ground. This scene made Rocky continually nod his head, not to speak of the actual strength of the Guard Corps, but merely the morale and fervor they displayed were already beyond comparison to before. The morale and enthusiasm displayed by the Guard Corps greatly satisfied Rocky, so he stepped forward to face the crowd. After nodding at Monty, he turned his gaze towards the guards. At such a time, his duty as the City Lord naturally required him to speak a few words. For this reason, Rocky was also quite nervous, for he had never addressed hundreds of people before. This was a first for him. While observing the Guard Corps, he pondered what to say. Yet, throughout this process, he managed himself well, exuding authority despite the intense pounding in his chest, giving the guards the impression that the City Lord was assessing them all. After a short while, Rocky began to speak. "Chapter your guards, do you know why I am here today?" "We do." After Rocky finished his sentence, the neatly arranged guards before him answered in unison. "Very good." With that response, Rocky nodded his head and swept his hand, signaling Lilia, who immediately understood and took out a runic shield. No, a magic energy shield from a row of boxes behind her. Holding the shield, Lilia turned towards Rocky, and upon seeing him nod slightly, she activated the shield's magic energy. In an instant, the shield in Lilia's hands emitted a faint glow, making the otherwise ordinary shield seem extraordinary. Such a scene immediately energized the gathered guards, their eyes sparkling with excitement. For these guards, mana weapons were considered treasures. Until now, not only had they never had the chance to use one, but they also had never even seen real magic energy equipment, nor had they ever imagined they would be able to use such high-grade gear. Therefore, when Lilia took out the runic shield, no, the magic energy shield, and activated its power, how could the guards not be thrilled? However, as excited as everyone was, they also knew that these pieces of equipment were not for everyone. Only the most outstanding amongst them would receive them, which only served to increase everyone's determination to demonstrate their readiness for battle. And this very excitement was exactly what Rocky wanted to see. He felt that nothing he could say at this moment would be as effective as simply presenting the real deal. And indeed, the outcome was just as he had expected, immediately motivating the guards. Consequently, he cleared his throat and loudly announced, "Today, I will conduct an assessment to test the results of your training. And those who perform excellently in the assessment will be rewarded with a 1-star magic energy shield and a piece of 1-star mana armor. Have I made myself clear?" "Clear." Once Rocky finished speaking, the guards in front of him puffed out their chests and shouted with full vigor. "Very well. Maintain this spirit and show me your true performance in the assessment." Having said this, Rocky then turned to Monty, who immediately stepped forward and addressed the guards. "Attention everyone. I will now announce the details of the assessment. Regarding this assessment, Rocky had already discussed it with Monty beforehand. The content was straightforward combat. The guards would pair off and engage in one-on-one battles, with their performance during the fight determining their assessment. Only those who excelled in actual combat would receive the equipment. This assessment might seem simple, yet it's the best way to determine the strength of the guards. After all, these individuals would soon follow Rocky to execute tasks for the mercenary guild, and absolute competence in combat is essential. It didn't take long for Monty to explain the rules of the assessment to the guards. While everyone had already anticipated them, learning they had to engage in one-on-one battles and only those who performed exceptionally could receive mana equipment did cause their expressions to change to some extent. Some guards became even more nervous after this, with a few of them turning pale, but others showed complete confidence. Far from being tense, these few unconsciously curved their lips into a smile, appearing utterly determined to succeed. Monty then brought over a box, specially prepared for this assessment. It contained slips of paper with the guards' names written on them, and who would face him was to be decided entirely by drawing lots to ensure the fairness of the assessment. "My lord, please." Presenting the box of lots to Rocky, Monty clearly intended for him to draw the first pairing for the assessment. At that moment, Rocky too felt a bit of excitement and immediately plunged his hand into the box, rummaging around for a good while before pulling out 2 slips of paper. Lamoureux Mario. Glancing at the slips, he read the names written on them aloud. As his voice rang out, the guard's gaze swiftly shifted en masse, settling on the 2 individuals in the ranks, naturally Lamoureux and Mario, whose names were called. Both men were around 30 years old, but perhaps they didn't expect to be picked first, whether that was lucky or unlucky. Both appeared somewhat disconcerted. It took them a good while to nervously step out from the formation. "Snap to it, show the level you have in training, and don't embarrass me." Perhaps sensing their nervousness, Monty shouted encouragingly as Lamoureux and Mario stepped out of the ranks and stood facing each other. His shouts sounded fierce, but perhaps due to being accustomed to his loud voice during training, Lamoureux and Mario relaxed significantly. Then, following Monty's command, their battle commenced. The fight went on for over 10 minutes before finally coming to an end, with Mario emerging victorious over Lamoureux. However, the triumphant Mario didn't receive the magic energy shield and mana armor, for although he had won, the performance of both combatants was rather ordinary. To put it bluntly, apart from showing good vigor, the battle had no shining moments. Such a display won neither Rocky's nor Lilia's approval, nor Monty's. Both the victor Mario and the defeated Lamoureux were clearly aware of their dismal performance. Being overly nervous, they failed to show their best in the fight, not even managing to demonstrate half of the strength they exhibited during training. This was precisely their issue. After all, Rocky isn't going to bite. If they are so nervous in front of him that they can't perform properly, how will they handle facing demons? N/O/vel/B//and C//OM. Against real demons, even an above-average performance may not suffice to save one's life. How could they expect to survive if their performance was subpar? So, under these circumstances, neither Lamoureux nor Mario received the coveted mana equipment. They could only return to their ranks dejectedly. As they rejoined the ranks, many among the troops began to understand. They finally grasped that the assessment wasn't something that could be easily completed. Simply winning wasn't enough to earn the mana equipment. They had to perform exceptionally well, which undoubtedly increased the difficulty of the assessment significantly. As a result, the atmosphere became even more tense and somber. The first assessment had ended, but neither participating party received rewards, as neither side's performance had satisfied Rocky. This outcome undoubtedly conveyed to the guards that this assessment was no child's play, and it significantly increased their psychological pressure. Not long after, the second assessment began. However, this time Monty took over the task of drawing lots instead of Rocky. With 200 participants undergoing assessment and pairs being matched, that meant 100 rounds of lot drawing, a laborious task that naturally fell to Monty. As Monty called out the names of 2 guards, the named pair stepped out of the lineup. At the command, the second assessment officially began. Perhaps the outcome of the first assessment had put too much pressure on the guards, because those participating in the second round performed not better, but noticeably worse. The second assessment dragged on for a full 15 minutes, comically ending with neither party daring to make the first move for almost half the time, creating an exceedingly unsightly scene. In such a scenario, when the victor was finally declared, the two participating guards dejectedly returned to their formation, clearly aware of their subpar performances, knowing that such a poor showing would surely exclude them from receiving mana equipment. What they didn't realize, however, was that they were not the only ones to be denied mana equipment. Indeed, after several subsequent group assessments, not a single person received mana equipment. And as yet another pair of guards returned to their ranks, dejected, the morale of the entire group plummeted to rock bottom. Originally full of energy, one by one, they deflated like punctured balls. Even Monty, standing beside Rocky, began to look visibly displeased at this time. Monty placed great importance on this series of assessments as well, because they were a test not just for the guards but for him personally. If the guards performed well, his credit as their trainer would be greatest. However, if they performed poorly, it would inevitably demonstrate his incompetence. With no one interfering in his training methods, Monty didn't even have the option to shirk responsibility. So as the performance of the guards deteriorated, Monty's expression became increasingly grim. To be honest, he hadn't expected things to turn out this way at all. The guards had performed far better in training than they were now showing. He had never imagined they'd display such poor performance in front of Rocky, and he was caught off guard by this outcome. Fortunately, although the guards were performing poorly, Rocky didn't seem displeased. Rocky indeed wasn't displeased at all, because he understood it was normal for the guards to perform this way. After all, Monty had had too little time to train them. Counting from the first day Monty became their trainer to now, it had only been 2 months. For him to get the guards to their current level in such a short time was quite an achievement. So, after another group assessment had ended, Rocky nodded at Monty just as he had done before, signaling that Monty could start the next round of assessment. With Rocky's signal, Monty once again began drawing lots. This time, however, when he saw the names written on the slip of paper, he silently heaved a sigh of relief, and then called out loud, "Robin, Sandro." As Monty called out these two names, a buzz suddenly erupted within the demoralized ranks of the guard corps, with many guards looking in the same direction. This naturally caught Rocky's attention, making him curiously follow the guards' gazes. He then saw a young man step out of the formation. The young man appeared to be just over 20, with nothing remarkable about his features, but with well-proportioned facial traits and a very stern expression, as if he did not know how to smile. As he stepped out of the formation, he immediately held his square shield in front of his chest and a long sword tied against the shield, slightly crouching to ready himself for combat. Then /O/vel/B /forward C//OM. Is that posture correct? After taking a look at the stance the young man adopted, Rocky nodded. That combat posture was typical of a soldier, not something easily assumed by ordinary people. His name is Sandro, 21 years old today. His grandfather once served as a soldier in another sky city, so he began training Sandro from a young age. As a result, his strength is one of the best within the Guard Corps, Lilia explained quietly beside Rocky, who was watching with interest. I see. After hearing Lilia's explanation, Rocky nodded, his interest in Sandro growing. Rocky then exchanged a look with Monty, and with Rocky's cue, Monty immediately commenced the assessment. As the assessment started, Sandro, armed with a shield and long sword, began advancing towards his opponent step by step. His pace was not fast, but each step was solid and menacing. At the same time, he kept his shield up in front of him, nearly completely covered behind it, revealing only his eyes and the cold edge of his sword. This kept him in a state from which he could launch an attack or mount a defense at any moment. Within 3 to 5 steps, Sandro closed in on his opponent, who, pressed relentlessly, was left with no escape, forced to strike. However, such a desperate attack naturally lacked any threat. When the opponent swung his long sword down, Sandro easily blocked it with a shield, and nearly at the same instant, he thrust his own long sword forward. A slash of cold light flashed. In a panic, Sandro's opponent hurriedly brought up his shield to block, narrowly parrying the blow. Sandro then made a sudden lunging step, kicking his opponent's shield away, and immediately afterward, he slammed his own shield hard against his opponent. A dull sound echoed, and Sandro's opponent fell to the ground, thus concluding the assessment. No one had expected such a decisive outcome. So swift it was almost unimaginable. Yet, the battle was also exceedingly spectacular. Sandro defeated his opponent with overwhelming force, turning the assessment into his own personal showcase. And he did it with great flair. This fantastic bout took Rocky by surprise, but it also left him extremely satisfied. So afterward, he glanced at Lilia, ready to have her bring over the prepared magic energy shield and mana armor to reward Sandro. But just at that moment, Sandro's opponent suddenly rose from the ground, an unyielding look on his face, and shouted to Rocky, "City Lord, I can still fight." Sandro's performance not only satisfied everyone, but also greatly exceeded everyone's expectations, to the extent that even Rocky couldn't help but cheer for him. In such a situation, Rocky naturally wasn't stingy at all and handed over the magic energy shield and mana armor to him. But just at that moment, before Rocky could have Lilia hand over the void magic armor to Sandro, the opponent whom Sandro had decisively defeated suddenly leaped up from the ground and shouted loudly at Rocky, "City Lord, I can still fight." This outcry immediately attracted everyone's attention, and many from the guard corps laughed upon hearing it. At this moment, Rocky naturally turned his attention toward this bristly fellow. Previously, his attention had been on Sandro, and he hadn't paid much notice to Sandro's opponent. But when he took a closer look, he realized that Sandro's opponent was actually a youngster, only 17 or 18 years old. His name is Robin. He's only 18 today and has just joined the Guard Corps recently. The Guard Corps had a roster of 200 people. Although every one of them knew Rocky, Rocky did not recognize them. So when Rocky looked at the youngster scrambling from the ground, Lilia gave a simple introduction at his side. This guard named Robin was only 18, clearly a naive and confused young man. After rising from the ground, he didn't admit defeat. Instead, he was hopping and jumping, his youthful face full of dissatisfaction. "City Lord, I can still fight. I really can still fight." Noticing that Rocky was only looking at him with a smile and not speaking, Robin became even more anxious and kept shouting, N//B/forward/C/forward/OM. Seeing his eager demeanor, Rocky, while chuckling, turned to look at Sandro and then asked, "Sandro, your opponent thinks he can still fight. How about you?" "I can." Sandro, who had already put away his long sword and shield, didn't say much. He simply answered and once again took his shield and long sword in hand, immediately getting ready for the battle. Thus, the second match of the same assessment between Sandro and Robin began. "Sandro, I won't go easy on you this time." Gripping his long sword with both hands, Robin, full of resentment, yelled at Sandro and then charged at him with large strides. He reached Sandro in no more than 2 steps and immediately lifted his long sword with both hands, slashing down ferociously. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. Robin swung his arms, striking thrice, but each swing landed on Sandro's raised shield. Not only that, Sandro, who was fending off these 3 strikes, did not even budge. This outcome was not because Robin lacked strength. In fact, he was giving it his all. Unfortunately, Sandro's defense was too solid. Facing the continuous assault, his defense was like a hill, steadfast and giving no opportunity to Robin. And after Robin's 3 strikes, Sandro directly kicked him in the knee, immediately knocking Robin down. Similar to before, it didn't take long for the second bout between the two to be decided, and the victor and loser did not change. "I can still fight." Yet after being knocked down once more, Robin immediately got up and charged towards Sandro again. And so, their struggle began. As Lilia had mentioned, since Robin had only recently joined the Guard Corps and had no foundation to speak of, he could only be considered a level 1 warrior at most. With such determination, alas, both his foundation and technique were still lacking by a large margin. In contrast, Sandro was entirely different. Although he was just a second-level warrior, his foundations were solid, and he was extremely adept at defense. The shield in his hands was like a thick wall, capable of fending off all attacks. Under such circumstances, the outcome of their exchanges was all too predictable. Robin was simply being overwhelmed. Yet, whether it was due to his stubbornness or foolishness, Robin, who kept getting knocked down, seemed like an indestructible roach, or like a weeble that wouldn't fall down. Despite being continuously knocked down, he was always able to stand back up. I can still fight. I can still fight. I can still fight. Time and again, he got up from the ground, each time shouting his slogan. Although he was quickly knocked down again, he still loudly proclaimed his determination to stand up anew. For a moment, the entire field was filled with one voice, a voice that seemed to cast a spell, drawing everyone's gaze involuntarily from Sandro to Robin. I can still... After knocking Robin down once more, before he could stand up again, Sandro directly pinned him down with the tip of his sword to his forehead, then slowly spoke. Robin, you can't defeat me. Surrender. No, I can still fight. Ignoring the sword above him, Robin suddenly lifted his head, roaring with resolve. I must receive the city lord's gifted equipment. I've already promised my mother. As he roared these words, he suddenly leaped forward and slammed into Sandro's chest, pushing Sandro back several steps and nearly unbalancing him. Robin's father died early, leaving only his mother to care for him. As the two of them became locked in combat again, Lilia explained to Rocky. As the captain of the guard corps, she was well acquainted with her guards. She then went on to say, I heard that Robin's mother has poor eyesight and can't weave. The whole family relies on Robin's income from the guard corps. He's been noisy about becoming the captain since his first day, saying that captains earn more and he could then give his mother a better life. In this world, the lives of commoners and nobles are as different as heaven and earth. Take Rocky, for example, who, although he always seems worried about money, never had to fret over food and drink as the city lord. In fact, if he hadn't been as driven as he is now, he could have lived his entire life without a care as the city lord. But ordinary people's lives are not the same. Take the residents of Thunderhawk City, for example. Even though Thunderhawk City employs a planned economic model to ensure everyone has food, some people still live in great hardship due to various reasons. Robin is one such case. So that's how it is. Understanding dawned on Rocky as he nodded at Lilia's explanation, then turned his attention back to the two fighters still in battle. By the time Lilia had finished telling Rocky about Robin's situation, Sandro and Robin were already fiercely engaged in combat. Sandro, who repeatedly knocked Robin down yet failed to win, was visibly growing annoyed. His brow was furrowed tightly, and his eyes gradually became colder, while Robin, as always, picked himself off the ground time and time again, with a more evident determination in his eyes. Stop! However, at that moment, Rocky suddenly called for a halt, prompting the two, who had been fighting earnestly, to cease their combat. Both fighters turned to Rocky, who was approaching them. Sandro, your performance was very good, far exceeding my expectations. I'm quite pleased, Rocky said as he approached Sandro, handing over a shield and armor he had crafted himself. His words were sincere. Sandro's performance had indeed won Rocky's approval. Thank you, my lord. Taking the shield and armor from Rocky, the always serious Sandro finally smiled and immediately knelt on one knee before him. Stand up. Rocky helped Sandro to his feet and nodded at him, then turned his gaze to Robin, who stood aside. Robin, City Lord, Enough, I know you can still fight, Rocky said with a shake of his head and a smile, full of appreciation, but you don't have to continue. Your perseverance has already earned my respect, and I am equally satisfied. Having said that, Rocky handed Robin a shield and a piece of armor. Thank you, City Lord. Upon receiving the shield and armor, Robin jumped for joy, hopping around on the spot for a while before remembering to thank Rocky. Afterward, the two returned to the ranks, their spirits high. Barely a moment passed before they were inundated with envious gazes. They were the first to receive magic energy equipment after such a lengthy examination process. The success of the two also greatly encouraged the other guards. The men, whose morale had been low due to poor performances in previous rounds, became excited again after witnessing the achievements of Sandro and Robin. Emboldened and invigorated once more, the participants recovered their normal performance in the subsequent assessments. Perhaps inspired by Robin, each guard entered the fray with renewed determination, making the event increasingly engaging. Under these circumstances, the equipment Rocky brought was finally distributed, one piece after the other. And so, the assessment continued, one round after another, and quickly it was evening. As the sky gradually darkened, the assessment was finally drawing to a close. When the last round ended, nearly all the 100 sets of equipment Rocky had brought had been handed out to the guards. However, not all were accounted for. One set remained undistributed by the end. The remaining set was naturally not going to be kept. So when everyone's assessment concluded, Monty addressed those guards who had not received equipment. Who among you would like to vie for this set of equipment? Upon hearing there was still a chance to compete, the guards who had failed the assessment perked up, eager to try their luck. City Lord, me, I want to try. A crisp shout suddenly rang out, catching everyone off guard as the voice didn't come from a member of the guard corps. As everyone turned to locate the source, they saw a young female beast man waving at Rocky from a distance, running towards the group as she waved. Isn't that Dusa? Recognizing the young female beast man at first glance, Rocky identified her. It was none other than Monty's daughter. Upon recognizing Dusa, Rocky turned to look at Monty and instantly saw that his expression was far from happy. But by then, Dusa had already raced over and, full of enthusiasm, asked Rocky, City Lord, may I try? Dusa, what are you doing here? Stop causing trouble. Seeing his daughter had actually come, Monty's face immediately turned livid as he angrily scolded her. But facing her father's scolding, Dusa, although somewhat scared, acted stubbornly. She didn't look at her father, her eyes filled with eagerness as she looked at Rocky. Now Rocky was in a difficult position. He of course could tell that Monty did not want his daughter to come, a thought clearly written on his livid face. However, Dusa's eagerness made it hard for Rocky to refuse. Thus, caught between a rock and a hard place, Rocky had no choice but to ask, Dusa, what can you do? I can shoot arrows. I can shoot arrows. Asked by Rocky, Dusa raised her hand as if a student answering a teacher's question. It was then that Rocky noticed Dusa was indeed carrying a longbow and a quiver bag. She had come fully prepared. Seeing Dusa's fully equipped appearance made Rocky realize that her presence here was no accident, but rather something she had planned in advance, or else she wouldn't have been so thoroughly prepared. In this situation, he could only give Monty a look. It was then that Monty quickly said, City Lord, you don't need to bother with her. Dusa is just causing trouble. Father, I'm not causing trouble. I am very formidable. At least more than them. Monty hadn't finished speaking when Dusa unhappily interrupted him, then turned to Rocky, dissatisfied, saying, City Lord, I am quite formidable. None of these guards can best me. Please let me try. Dusa, stop causing trouble and go home. I'm not causing trouble. Seeing the father and daughter arguing just like that, Rocky reluctantly stepped between the two. Enough with the arguing. After stopping their argument, he looked towards Dusa, and her puffy, angry face immediately brightened when she saw him look her way. Dusa, do you want this last set of magic energy equipment? Yes. What do you want this equipment for? I want to join the fight alongside my father. To Rocky's series of questions, Dusa answered without hesitation. She wanted to wear the new equipment and fight alongside her father. This indeed was Dusa's true intent, as beast men, regardless of gender, are natural warriors. They not only possess innate abilities for combat, but also crave battle deep in their bones. However, this is exactly where the conflict between Monty and Dusa lay. Monty did not want his daughter to end up like himself. He only wished her to live a peaceful life. Thus, he never involved her in his affairs. Yet, Dusa was a typical beast man, innately craving to join her father on the battlefield, just as Mani had when he was a demon hunter, and even now. This issue had often led to conflicts between father and daughter. So that's it. Facing Dusa's straightforward answer, Rocky just smiled and then said, Dusa, I can let you try, but as you can see, anyone who gets the magic energy equipment definitely needs real skill. Do you have that confidence? Yes. With her big eyes looking at Rocky, Dusa nodded without hesitation. N/O/vel/B//C//om. All right. After saying that, Rocky casually picked up a stone from the ground, about the size of a fist, weighed it in his hand, and then looked towards Dusa. Dusa, if you can hit this stone with one arrow, I will give you the last set of magic energy equipment. As his words fell, Rocky threw the stone into the air. This was the best solution he could think of. Mani did not want his daughter to be exposed to any danger or be involved in his affairs, and Rocky certainly would not defy his wishes. So he presented Dusa with this difficult challenge. It was already dark, and the stone he threw into the air was only fist-sized. Those with poor eyesight couldn't see it clearly at all, let alone hit it with an arrow. In this way, though Dusa would fail, she would not blame her father for not giving her a chance. It was absolutely a perfect solution in every respect, at least that's what Rocky thought. However, what he hadn't expected was that at the very moment he threw the stone, Dusa immediately grabbed the longbow from her back, bent it, fitted an arrow, and shot it out with a swoosh. Right after, a whooshing sound was heard as the fled arrow drew an arc in front of everyone. And then with a snap, it hit the stone in mid-air. In an instant, the entire place fell silent. Is that even possible? Watching as Dusa fluidly hit the stone he had thrown with one arrow, Rocky's eyes widened in disbelief. He had never imagined Dusa would have such skill. Dusa's archery was so superb. Hit it! Hit it! City Lord, am I great? While everyone was stunned by Dusa's exquisite archery, Dusa herself cheered gleefully like a magpie, not even waiting for Rocky to speak before she ran to Lilia's side and took away the last set of magic energy equipment. No one had expected that Rocky's inspection of the guard corps would end with Dusa taking the last set of equipment. However, this inspection was clearly a success. Rocky not only handed over 100 sets of personally crafted equipment to the guards, but he also witnessed the training achievements of the guard corps over this period. After 2 months of training, the guard's strength had clearly grown considerably stronger. Notable talents like Sandro and Robin had emerged, which was definitely joyous for Rocky, as these individuals could potentially become the backbone of Rocky and Thunderhawk City in future. Of course, Dusa's performance was an unexpected delight. Her archery skills completely surpassed everyone's expectations, and even Mani was unaware of his daughter's prowess, which naturally made Rocky interested in her talent. However, he was not in a hurry about this matter. Indeed, if Mani was not willing to let his daughter follow him, Rocky would certainly not insist. Also, after today's review, Rocky now had a comprehensive understanding of the Guard Corps' strength. This understanding was very important and necessary for him, as he was soon going to lead these guards to accomplish the tasks assigned by the Mercenary Guild. Yes, Rocky had already prepared everything, so it was time to accept the task from the Mercenary Guild. Now, the food problem in Thunderhawk City was solved, and there was some surplus money in the treasury, enough at least to buy the next batch of yarn. After 2 months of training, the Guard Corps was fully prepared, both physically and equipment-wise. Finally, Rocky could focus on the next step of his plan. His next plan was naturally the mission from the Mercenary Guild. Since he had returned from Eternal City 2 months ago, he had been working hard toward this goal, and now everything was finally in place to take on missions from the Mercenary Guild. So, after returning to the City Lord's mansion, Rocky didn't go to sleep right away, but eagerly took out the mission receiver. This mission receiver, which he had bought from the Mercenary Guild for 500 gold coins, allowed him to easily review all the missions from the Mercenary Guild and directly contact them to receive missions. The mission receiver wasn't large, about the size of a palm, and looked like a dish embedded with a magic stone, equipped with several buttons. When Rocky turned it on, a beam of light shot out from it and transformed into an image right before his eyes. Damn, that scared me. Startled by the image projected from the receiver, Rocky immediately thought of a term not of this world: holographic projection. This mission receiver was just like a holographic projector. When he looked more closely at the image, he saw rows and rows of information, all related to missions. Rocky's interest was piqued, and he quickly selected one of the messages, pressing the buttons on the receiver to read the details closely. Type: Merchant Ship Escort. Requirement: Avoid magic squad of more than 10 people. Duration: 3 days. Mission objective: Accompany the merchant ship from Bailey City and escort it to 100 B City, making a land stop for resupply. The mission is completed once the merchant ship successfully reaches its destination. Commission: 30,000 gold coins. Mission issuer: times Chamber of Commerce. Unlike the bulletin board inside the Mercenary Guild, the task information displayed on the mission receiver was very detailed, clear at a glance, and very convenient. When Rocky saw the detailed information of the randomly selected task, he couldn't help but lick his lips. Goodness, a 3-day escort mission can earn 30,000 gold coins. That's quite generous. I just wonder what kind of valuable goods the issuing Chamber of Commerce is transporting to hire a Void Magic Squad for such a high price. Although surprised by the high commission of the mission, Rocky quickly moved on to other information because he couldn't take this mission. Shortly after, another piece of information caught his eye. Type: Demons Extermination. Requirement: A mercenary group of over 100 people that N/O/vel/B//and.C///om. Duration: Mission objective: Head to the forest farm owned by the Mungma Commerce Guild in the Jalan Mountain Range. Exterminate the demons within. Estimated number of demons is over 30. Specific types unknown. No high-level demons. And the mission is completed once all demons are exterminated. Commission: 40,000 gold coins. Mission issuer: Mungma Commerce Guild. Unlike the previous escort mission, what attracted Rocky's attention was an extermination mission, and the commission for this task was very high, a total of 40,000 gold coins. Furthermore, the requirements for this mission completely matched Rocky's capabilities, even exceeding them, meaning that he could definitely take on this mission. But Rocky didn't act rashly, because after carefully reading through the mission information, he realized that although the commission was high, it was also extremely dangerous. The objective of the mission was to clean out the demons that had occupied the forest farm, and according to the information, the number of demons inside was over 30. That number was a bit too much. 30 demons. Although Rocky hadn't engaged in large-scale combat with demons before, he knew that such a number and scale of demons could only be confronted by a Void Magic Squad, ordinary soldiers, let alone a mercenary group of over 100 people. Even a 500-person mercenary group might not be able to handle them. So, despite the very high commission for this task, Rocky wasn't blinded by the amount of money at stake. He indeed wanted to earn money by completing tasks, but he wasn't about to risk his life for it. Also, precisely because he maintained his rationality, the more Rocky looked at this task, the stranger it seemed to him. If this task truly required exterminating at least 30 demons to be completed, then why would the Mungma Commerce Guild need to hire a mercenary group of more than 100 people? You should know the commission they were offering was a whopping 40,000 gold coins, a sum sufficient even for a mercenary group larger than 500 members. This is really strange. Shaking his head, although Rocky couldn't figure out the answer, he still felt that the task released by the Mungma Commerce Guild, despite its high commission, was too dangerous, and there seemed to be something off about it. It was a task he wouldn't accept. Fortunately, there were many tasks available at the Mercenary Guild, and there was a vast array to choose from. Thus, even if this particular task wasn't suitable, there were other tasks to consider. In this way, Rocky soon began to look up information about various tasks one after the other and noted down the ones he was interested in. Before he knew it, he had spent most of the evening looking, and by the time he realized it, it was nearly dawn. The next day, he called Lilia, Aileen, and Monty into his room. The tasks from the Mercenary Guild were definitely to be taken, but they couldn't be accepted recklessly, or else he might end up spending all they had, which was not something Rocky wanted to see happen. Thus, for the sake of safety, they needed to discuss which task to take as a group. Once everyone had arrived, Rocky took out the task receiver and showed everyone the tasks he had selected the previous night. He believed these tasks were within their capability, but which one to actually take still required everyone's opinions to make a decision. However, before that, he first brought up that extermination task again because he always felt there was something peculiar about it. "Look at this task," he said. "Doesn't it seem problematic to you? I just feel there's something odd." After bringing up the detailed information of the extermination task, Rocky spoke. On being asked, Lilia, Aileen, and Monty all looked towards the task information. "My lord, is it the requirements of this extermination task that you find problematic?" Aileen was the first to speak, having just glanced at it briefly. This was somewhat unexpected for Rocky, as he thought perhaps Lilia or Monty would be the first to notice something amiss, but he quickly nodded in agreement. "Exactly. I don't understand why the Mengma Commerce Guild would spend 40,000 gold coins, yet only hire a mercenary group of more than 100 members. Logically, a task of this difficulty would require a group of at least 500 members to complete. You know, the Mengma Commerce Guild did it on purpose." Even before Rocky could finish articulating his doubts, Aileen had an answer for him, continuing to say, "The reason the Mengma Commerce Guild set the task requirements so low is actually to attract those mercenaries whose capabilities are clearly insufficient but are blinded by the prospect of money. Because if a mercenary group with insufficient strength took this task, even if they couldn't complete it, they could still indirectly lower the difficulty of it. After all, a group of more than 100 might not be able to exterminate all 30 demons, but could probably kill at least one or two, right? But if only one or two demons are killed, the Mengma Commerce Guild definitely won't pay the commission, yet the difficulty of the task would have been reduced. Then, the Mengma Commerce Guild could immediately lower the commission and raise the requirements, allowing a competent mercenary group to quickly finish the task. This method guarantees them a no-loss situation," Aileen explained. In just a few words, Aileen had clearly explained all of Rocky's doubts, leaving him completely dumbfounded. "I never thought it could be done this way." It took a good while for Rocky to regain his composure after Aileen's explanation, after which he frowned. Although he had felt this extermination task was fishy, he hadn't realized there were so many twists to it, and the Mengma Commerce Guild's tactic was utterly devious. Seeing through Rocky's thoughts, Aileen then said, "My lord, these are just small tricks of merchants, quite normal. We just need to be more cautious." When Rocky couldn't help but feel the Mengma Commerce Guild was too sly, Aileen appeared unconcerned. Remember, Aileen was a merchant too. For a merchant, profits are always the top priority. To achieve their goals while minimizing expenses, such little tricks are nothing. Moreover, though the task seemed sly, it was up to the volunteers. If those mercenary groups, clearly lacking in strength but hoping to make a fortune, ended up annihilated, whom could they blame? Therefore, to Aileen, such tricks were nothing much at all. Upon hearing Aileen's words, Rocky, while reluctant to admit it, couldn't help but nod. He also privately felt fortunate that calling everyone together to discuss this had been the right move, because clearly, what seemed simple in the Mercenary Guild's tasks often had many underlying complications. One misstep could lead to unwittingly benefiting others. So afterward, he laid out the tasks he had picked the day before, discussing with everyone which task they should take. After spending much of the night selecting, Rocky had looked at dozens of task information and finally chose 3 of them. He believed these 3 tasks suited him well in various aspects, so after Lilia and the others had gathered, he pulled up the detailed information for these 3 tasks. The first task chosen by Rocky was an escort mission. Type: escort caravan. Requirement: mercenary group of over 100. Duration: 7 days. Task objective: escort the caravan from Deep Valley Mine, protect it through the entire journey as it passes Deep Gorge Canyon onward to the Great Drought Highlands to wait for the skyship pickup. The task is completed once the skyship finishes transporting the goods. Commission: 10,000 gold coins that n/o/vel/b/g.c//om. Posted by Drake Commerce. Rocky felt this escort mission was quite good for a start, as the time was not too long, and secondly, the commission was quite decent. And from the description, he felt there weren't significant dangers involved. leading the Guard Corps and adding 10 skyships. Completing this task should not pose any problems. The second task he chose was a demon extermination mission. Type: Demon Extermination. Requirement: mercenary group of over 200, those with floating battleships given priority. Duration: task objective: clear out the demons on the Rhine plains, killing at least 20 demons to complete the task. Commission: 5,000 gold coins. Spoils of battle belong to the mercenary group. Posted by Libra City. Rocky was interested in this mission mainly because of the high commission. Although it was only 5,000 gold coins, the spoils of battle belonged to the mercenary group. As a demon extermination mission, naturally, the spoils were the slain demons. By this calculation, the mission's commission was worth far more than a mere 5,000 gold coins, because the mission requirement was to kill at least 20 demons for it to be completed. This meant that Rocky could earn not only the 5,000 gold coins, but also at least 20 demon corpses. And if he were to sell these demon corpses, even if each sold for just 1,000 gold coins, he could earn at least 20,000 gold coins. Such a generous reward truly tempted Rocky, so he kept this mission. The third task he chose was a coordinated defense mission. Type: coordinated defense. Requirement: mercenary group of over 100. Duration: 30 days. Task objective: cooperatively defend the mining outpost, withstand demon attacks together, and successfully defend for 30 days to complete the task. Commission: 10,000 gold coins. Spoils of battle belong to the mercenary group. 500 kilograms of yellow scale, ore. Posted by the Forsaken People. The last task chosen by Rocky, to be honest, was filler because apart from the high commission, many details were unclear to him, such as the nature of the Forsaken People who posted the task. However, the commission was indeed very high, so he kept it. It didn't take long after that for Lilia and the others to review the detailed information of the above 3 tasks thoroughly, then turned their gaze to Rocky. What do you think? Which task do you feel is suitable? Seeing that the 3 had finished reviewing all the task information, Rocky quickly asked. My lord, the first task is definitely not acceptable. This time it was still Aileen who spoke first. However, her words caused Rocky to be slightly taken aback, and even Monty's expression showed some change. Because the task Aileen was referring to was the escorting of the cargo, which was the very task that Rocky particularly liked. He felt that this task met his requirements in terms of commission and difficulty level. Monty shared the same thoughts as Rocky, so his expression changed when Aileen spoke up. Aileen, is there a problem with this task? Given Aileen's previous performance, Rocky did not dare to ignore her opinion, so he asked immediately afterward. Facing his question, Aileen directly responded, My lord, the information about this task is too vague. Escorting the cargo through the canyon sounds simple, but what kind of attacks will we encounter along the way? Will it be an attack by demons or humans? None of this is clarified. Moreover, the client has stated that the task will only be considered complete after the skyship has transported all the goods. How long will this take? Will it be completed in one trip, or will it require 10? Whether there will be attacks during this time is also not mentioned in the task details, so I think this mission is not very reliable. We must not underestimate Aileen just because she does not fight. To others, tasks published by the Mercenary Guild may seem like just tasks, but to Aileen, they are all business and she knows business well. In such a scenario, she analyzed the task so thoroughly in just a few words that Rocky was left staring in amazement, and even blushed from embarrassment, because many of the issues raised by Aileen were ones he had not thought of before. What's more important is that Aileen's analysis sounded very reasonable, and even after listening to her, Rocky himself also began to feel that the task was unreliable. As a result, he sought the opinions of Lilia and Monty, then eliminated the first task. If the first task is no good, what about the second one? Having eliminated his preferred task, Rocky could only compromise and focus on the second task at hand, which was the demon eradication mission. But as soon as he finished his question, Monty shook his head. My lord, this task is absolutely unacceptable. Why? Turning to look at Monty, Rocky didn't know what to say. Why couldn't they accept this task either? My lord, I've been to the Rhine Plains mentioned in the task. It's a true great plain as far as the eye can see, riddled with demons, including high-level demons that appear frequently. We absolutely cannot go to such a dangerous place. Monty's words left Rocky stunned, and he sighed inwardly, having never expected that the tasks he had worked so hard to find were all unfeasible. Yet, Rocky could not refute the reasons given by Monty. Monty had been a demon hunter and had traveled more than anyone else. If he said the Rhine Plains were off limits, then they certainly were. With no other choice, Rocky reluctantly had to reject the second task he found and then turned his attention to the third task. Glancing at the last task, Rocky felt there was no need to consider it, as it was only chosen to make up the numbers. To his surprise, facing this task that was meant just to fill the list, Lilia, Aileen, and Monty all fell silent. "What's the matter with you?" Noticing everyone's silence regarding the last task, Rocky blinked his large eyes innocently and asked, "My lord, about the task issued by the Forsaken People. You surely know what that entails, right?" Seeing Rocky's naive expression, Aileen looked at him in slight surprise. However, facing Eileen's astonishment, Rocky shook his head like a rattle. Indeed, he did not know anything about the Forsaken People. Looking at Aileen, Rocky blinked his large eyes, a look of confusion on his face because he truly did not know what the Forsaken People was all about. Seeing that he was actually unaware of this matter, Monty, who was beside him, spoke up. "My lord, the Forsaken People is the term we use to refer to those who still live on the land." "What?" Upon hearing Monty's words, Rocky was so surprised that his mouth hung open in amazement. Of course, one couldn't blame him, for he was, after all, a traveler from another world. Although he was very familiar with this world, his understanding was limited only to what he could come in contact with. As for some matters he had never encountered since his arrival, Rocky knew very little, and the Forsaken People was one such issue. Over 100 years ago, people built Sky City and fled to the sky to escape the demons, a fact known to all. But the situation back then was far from simple. In reality, when humans had constructed the first Sky City and were ready for a large-scale migration to the skies, a significant portion opposed the idea. This opposition is mentioned in Wencel's will, and at the same time, the capacity of Sky City to hold people was very limited. This led to many people either voluntarily or involuntarily staying on the land during the initial stages of the move to the sky. Later on, as more sky cities were constructed, people truly began migrating in earnest. Yet even then, there was still a significant number of individuals who chose to stay on the land to continue the fight against the demons. And it was these people who decided to stay on the land that became known as the Forsaken People. The Forsaken People called those who fled to the Sky Traders, seeing their actions as a cowardly escape, as a surrender of the land that had nurtured them. Therefore, the Forsaken People would rather stay and battle the demons on the land than flee to the sky. This divergence of opinions caused the two groups to split into two major camps at the beginning of the Sky Era, leading to endless disputes. One side accused the other of stubbornness, while the other called them cowards. Eventually, things escalated to the point of complete hostility, cutting off all relations between them. This state of affairs continued for decades until the last few years, especially after the first counteroffensive war began, that the relationship between the two sides started to ease up. Today, interactions between the two groups have grown increasingly frequent. Take, for instance, the last task that Rocky had found. The person who posted the task came from the land. I really had no idea that such things were going on. After listening to Monty's explanation, Rocky slowly nodded in a daze and couldn't help but think back to the magic energy image Wencel left in the Lost Research Institute. Now, giving it some thought, Wencel's will did indeed mention that he was not the only one who stayed on the land, that many others, like him, chose to remain and continue the fight against the demons. And now that he knew people still lived on the land and were continuously fighting the demons, Rocky suddenly thought of something else. If people were still on the land and resisting the demons, didn't that mean the land hadn't been completely occupied? No, the land has long been occupied, an OVLB //JNN. However, facing this question of his, whether it was Monty, Aileen, or Lilia, They all shook their heads. This time, Lilia was the one who spoke, saying afterward, "Although those who stayed on the land have continuously fought against the demons, they have not succeeded. When Sky City had just been invented, the demons had occupied about 2/3 of the land. But by the early stages of the Sky Era, in just a short span of 10+ years, the land was completely lost. Nearly all cities were destroyed by the demons. And although the people remaining on the land fought valiantly, in the end, they could only hide in places less frequently visited by the demons and barely managed to survive. As for now, there are only 3 cities on the land that are truly under human control, and the reason these 3 cities have remained is due to the 2 counter-offensive wars we launched. Otherwise, not a single city would have been left on the land. So, it is..." With Lilia's explanation, Rocky took a deep breath, for it was not difficult to hear from her words that life was hard for the people who remained on the land. But that was not surprising. Staying on the land meant confronting the demons daily and facing such terrifying creatures. It would have been strange if their lives had been easy. As for the counteroffensive wars that Lilia mentioned, Rocky did have some recollection. The so-called counteroffensive wars referred to the people in the sky uniting all sky cities in a major counteroffensive campaign to retake the land. The wars occurred twice and were respectively known as the First and Second Counteroffensive Wars. The scale of these 2 wars were unprecedented, with each war mobilizing nearly all sky cities. The fighting was ferociously intense, with close to 1 million soldiers dead or injured and dozens of sky cities destroyed, including the destruction of several major ones. Yet despite all this, the land remained in the hands of the demons, and the outcome of both wars ended in failure. All of these matters were in textbooks, so Rocky remembered them. However, from what Lilia had just said, although both counteroffensive wars had failed, they seemed to have been not entirely fruitless, as the land's 3 cities at least managed to survive because of them. As Rocky pondered this, Eileen then spoke. "But don't underestimate the Forsaken people. Despite their harsh life on the land, they are very wealthy." "Oh, why is that?" Upon hearing this, Rocky was slightly startled, evidently not understanding. The people on the land were wealthy. How could that be possible when they lived at risk of being killed by demons every day? How could they possibly be wealthy? "My lord, don't forget that the resources on the land are much more abundant than in the sky." Seeing Rocky's confusion, Eileen elaborated. "Although those on the land live under the shadow of demons, because of the land's abundant resources and the improved relations with us, there is often trade between the 2 sides. Take, for example, the task that my lord has chosen. The goal of this task is to assist in defending a mine, and if I'm not mistaken, this mine should belong to the Forsaken people. My lord, you don't need me to elaborate on the immense value a mine can generate, do you?" Eileen's explanation led to an epiphany for Rocky, as it was true, just as she said. The people on the land sat upon countless resources, and by selling these resources to Sky City, it would mean a continuous flow of wealth. And since the conversation had come full circle back to the task at hand, Rocky then asked, "Given this, what do you think? Should we take on this task or not?" After a lengthy discussion, everyone's focus finally circled back to the initial topic, whether to accept the task from the Forsaken people or not. After a lesson for Rocky, he became even more confused, so he had no choice but to look towards Lilia and the others. "My lord, if we speak solely of profit, this task is acceptable." It was Eileen who spoke first this time. "The commission for this task is 10,000 gold coins, and any spoils of war are ours to keep. That means any demons killed in battle belong to us. And on top of that, they will pay us 500 kilograms of yellow scale mine. If we calculate this, we could earn at least 30 to 50,000 gold coins if we can complete this task." Such a huge profit honestly tempted Eileen, and that was exactly why she thought the task was acceptable. However, she also didn't forget to remind them, "Just please remember, my lord, the profit of a task is directly proportional to its danger. If there is such a large profit to be made from this task, then its difficulty will inevitably be very high." Rocky nodded and fell into deep thought. The reminder from Eileen made a lot of sense to him. According to her calculation, the profit of the task was indeed enormous. But let's not forget, the Mercenary Guild is not a charity. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Hence, the greater the profit of a task, the higher and potentially even greater the risk. I'm not so sure. But at that moment, Lilia spoke up, and it seemed she didn't quite agree with Eileen's opinion. Rocky, I think that if we take on this task, there will definitely be danger, but the difficulty might not be higher than the previous two tasks. Oh! Lilia's words turned everyone's attention toward her, and Rocky felt extremely surprised. He knew Lilia's personality better than anyone, and that was exactly why he was surprised. From his point of view, it would have been normal for Lilia to strongly oppose such a dangerous task. Then Lilia looked at him and said, "Have you forgotten? I once followed the old master to land to fight, so I have had the experience of joining forces with the Forsaken people. NOVLB //JNN. You may have overlooked something. Although the people living on land are always threatened by demons, it has also made them brave and skilled in battle. Almost everyone, even the women, possesses great strength. Otherwise, they couldn't possibly survive on the land today. The goal of this task is to assist the Forsaken people in defending the mine, which means we don't have to bear the defense's burden alone. The Forsaken people will share a lot of the pressure, as the minerals are theirs. They will be the ones who are most diligent and committed in this task. So, I think this task will indeed be very dangerous, but if we talk about the ratio of reward to risk, it might actually be the highest of the three tasks. That does make sense. Having listened to all this, Rocky couldn't help but nod his head. He found Lilia's points very reasonable. After all, the mineral resources they were supposed to defend belonged to the Forsaken people, who would surely be more dedicated and committed than himself. And if the Forsaken people's fighting capability was as formidable as Lilia said, it would definitely alleviate some of their own pressure. My lord, I also agree with Lilia's opinion. We could take on this task. As Rocky nodded repeatedly, Monty also expressed his opinion at this time. And if even he said so, it meant that Lilia, Eileen, and Monty all affirmed the task concerning the Forsaken people. Okay, then let's take on this task. With this, Rocky felt assured. Without any hesitation, he used the task receiver to contact the Mercenary Guild and successfully accepted the task. The process of accepting the task was very simple. It didn't even require verification of the mercenary group size that Rocky claimed, because after he met with the Forsaken people, they would confirm with the Mercenary Guild. If Rocky had lied, they wouldn't have confirmed his eligibility. After successfully taking on the task, Rocky was given a set of coordinates. He had to meet with the Forsaken people within a week at those coordinates, or the task would automatically be considered a failure. This wasn't a difficult matter for Rocky, since Sky City itself could fly. Therefore, he adjusted the flight direction of Sky City and headed directly to the location of the coordinates. Once everything was in order, everyone began their final preparations. Rocky started tuning his void magic armor. Lilia was organizing her rune equipment, and Monty went to the guard corps to inform everyone of this news. Everything was carried out in an orderly fashion. However, during this process, Eileen told Rocky something, that Jiashi had already left. Jiashi had left Thunderhawk City in a rage. Unfortunately, on the day he left, Rocky happened to be leading everyone to a review at the guard corps, so nobody knew he had left, and his departure only reached Eileen's ears the day after. By the time Rocky learned of it, Jiashi had been gone for several days. Did he say anything when he left? Upon learning that Jiashi had finally left, Rocky asked with a chuckle, "I heard from Feli, who's in charge of the Skyport, that he left cursing and swearing, not seeming to say anything useful." Eileen slightly curled her lips in a smirk when she mentioned Jiashi, as if speaking of a joke. Jiashi had indeed become a joke this time, having spent a month and a half in Thunderhawk City without accomplishing anything. Not only that, but the 5 ships of food he had brought ended up being mostly wasted. So when Eileen said that Jiashi kept cursing as he left, her words couldn't be truer. In fact, Jiashi was not just cursing. He even felt the urge to kill. With his intelligence, how could he not realize that he had been played like a monkey for over a month by Rocky and his team? So when he left, not only was he cursing, but he also threatened that the Azure Commerce Guild would not let this matter slide. Unfortunately, Rocky couldn't care less about such threats. Not because he didn't care about the Azure Commerce Guild, but because he didn't care about Jiaxi. The Azure Commerce Guild was indeed a large chamber of commerce. There was no doubt about that. But would they really attack Thunderhawk City over this matter? Just for Jiaxi and 5 ships of food? Certainly not. In fact, Rocky felt that Jiaxi should be worrying not about how to take revenge on him, but rather about how to explain himself to the Chamber of Commerce upon his return. He spent a month and a half and failed to close a deal. Moreover, he lost a sizable amount of food. The responsibility and loss would surely not fall on Thunderhawk City. Jiaxi would have to bear it. So as far as Rocky was concerned, Jiaxi's departure was his problem. Rocky had no time to bother with such matters. He needed to focus on preparing for the upcoming task. That was the top priority. The mission from the Mercenary Guild was now Rocky's top priority, and he permitted no errors on this matter. Thus, during the flight towards Thunderhawk City's coordinates, not only did he fine-tune his void magic armor to ensure it functioned flawlessly in battle, but he also preemptively considered any potential issues they might encounter. As for the coordinates they were headed to, they were not too far from Thunderhawk City. The mission required that they arrive within 7 days, but Thunderhawk City had reached the target area above in just 3 days. Attention! Inside the skyport of Thunderhawk City, the neatly arranged guards stood before Rocky. Upon Monty's command, they all puffed out their chests and stood up straight. By this moment, the guards were already briefed about the mission. They harbored no complaints, for they understood clearly that they were the guards of Thunderhawk City, which belonged to Rocky. Thus they would do whatever Rocky ordered without question. However, even with mental preparation, everyone couldn't help feeling tense at the moment of departure, a tension that was almost visibly written on each person's face. Of course, this was to be expected since these guards had never experienced any combat before, so this mission could be considered their very first. In such a scenario, being the city lord, Rocky naturally needed to boost everyone's morale. At that moment, Rocky, dressed in his void magic armor, stood in front of everyone. His gaze swept across each face, capturing every guard's expression. Then he spoke. "Guards, do you know what we are here to do?" "Yes, to complete the mission for the city lord." At the end of Rocky's words, the guards responded in unison. "Wrong." However, Rocky suddenly shouted in anger, startling everyone. "You are not here just to complete a mission. You are here to fight. As guards of Thunderhawk City, combat is your sworn duty, and this time you will fulfill that duty by following me in a battle against the demons." After raising his voice to make this proclamation, Rocky paused for a moment. Only after scanning the crowd with his gaze did he continue in a more even tone. "Guards, are you afraid to fight the demons? Are you frightened?" Before the guards could respond, Rocky pointed at one of them and asked directly. Aye. City Lord, I." Suddenly singled out by Rocky, this guard was clearly unprepared and struggled to speak. Therefore, Rocky interrupted him. "You're scared, I can see it." After saying that, he addressed everyone. "You don't need to answer my previous question because I've already seen the answer on your faces. I know you are nervous, even frightened, but that is normal. Even I was filled with nerves and just as scared as you during my first battle against the demons. If it were for my most loyal guard, Lilia, constantly protecting me, I might have already died, so I don't blame you. However, I want you to know something. Demons are not invincible. There is absolutely no need for you to be afraid. Your comrades are right beside you, and I, your city lord, will be at the forefront of the battle. I, your city lord, will be your most loyal guard in the battle. Guards, tell me, are you afraid?" "No fear. No fear. No fear." Under Rocky's encouragement, the guards suddenly became spirited, letting out a deafening roar. And in that roar, the tension on their faces and the fear in their eyes were swept away. Everyone on board, prepared to depart. After the 3 roars, Rocky issued the order to board, and all the guards in attendance promptly boarded the pre-prepared skyships. As soon as the guards were all aboard, Rocky also boarded the ship, accompanied by Lilia and Monty, and following his command, exactly 10 skyships ascended, slowly flying out of Thunderhawk City's defensive net, heading towards the land. This time, Rocky had truly pulled out all the stops, deploying all the skyships in the city and taking a full 180 members of the 200-strong Guard Corps, leaving only 20 guards stationed in the city. At the same time, he brought Lilia and Monty with him, while Aileen stayed in Thunderhawk City to coordinate. For this mission, Rocky had indeed put all his available resources on the line, all to ensure the successful completion of this mission. Afterward, the skyships departed from Thunderhawk City, flying downwards toward the land, with Rocky, Lilia, and Monty making final discussions and preparations in the cabin. Lilia, if there is a large-scale battle this time, you will command the Guard Corps. Inside the cabin, Rocky glanced at Lilia, then said, among them, Monty's power was undoubtedly the strongest, but his strength was personal. As a former demon hunter, Monty lacked experience in command, an area in which only Lilia was experienced. Since Lilia had previously gone to war with Rocky's father and knew what real combat was like, Rocky decided to let her command the Guard Corps. Okay. Lilia nodded without any hesitation to take on this important responsibility. N/O/vel/B/C//C/OM. Monty, if we engage the demons in battle, you must obey Lilia's commands and also lead the guards. This task is yours now. Don't worry, my lord. After nodding, Monty looked at Lilia. Miss Lilia, my life is in your command. As for me, after arranging for Lilia and Monty, Rocky spoke about himself. Once the battle starts, I will act alone, dealing with the strongest demons on one hand and commanding the floating warship on the other. That's fine, but be very careful, and don't try to overdo it. Instead of stopping Rocky's arrangements, Lilia accepted them because in large-scale combat situations where they faced a large number of demons, Rocky, with his void magic armor, would be the most crucial asset in combat. He indeed needed to tackle the strongest demons, and was the only one capable of commanding the skyships during the battle due to his ability to fly. City Lord. Just as Rocky had finished making these arrangements, the door to the cabin suddenly opened, and Feli entered. Feli, standing at the door, saluted Rocky, then reported, City Lord, we have reached the land and are advancing towards the coordinates. Good, I'm aware. After hearing this, Rocky nodded, then looked at Lilia and Monty. Let's go, it's time to meet our employer. With that, he left the cabin with the two of them. P.S. After such a long time of peace, it's time for a real battle. Please cast your votes for Rocky to boost his morale. Accompanying Lilia and Monty, Rocky exited the cabin and stood on the deck of the skyship, looking out over a barren expanse. By now, the skyship had reached land and was slowly flying just dozens of meters above the ground, arriving at a desolate landmass. Not a single tree or blade of grass adorned this barren land. Just rust-like yellow soil covered the ground. Occasionally, whirlwinds swept up gusts of dust, creating an air of desolation. Standing at the bow of the skyship, looking down at the bleak landscape, Rocky found the sight difficult to adjust to. He had been to the land twice before, but each time he witnessed lush forests and verdant grasslands, never the desolation he was seeing now. Despite the bleak appearance, he felt this might be more apt for the current state of the land. At least, that's what Rocky believed. Afterward, the skyship continued towards the coordinates of their mission, and before long, a steep mountain appeared before their eyes. What mountain is this? As they gazed at the distant peak, Rocky could not help but gape, and even Lilia and Monty gasped at the sight. The mountain soared into the clouds, blocking the skyship's path, and its exceedingly steep surfaces, almost as if cut by axes, gave it a sharp look. Feli, what's going on? Why are we turning? The towering mountain blocked their way, yet the skyship was still heading straight towards it, prompting Rocky to urgently summon Feli. Sir, the coordinates you gave us are indeed this mountain. Feli, looking aggrieved, because the mission coordinates Rocky had given were for this mountain. Hearing this, Rocky was stunned. Clearly, he hadn't anticipated such a result. By this time, The skyship had drawn very close to the mountain, and as they approached, the true enormity of the mountain was revealed, far beyond Rocky's imagination. Initially, the mountain had merely been shocking from a distance, but now up close, he felt not just shock but a tinge of fear. For the mountain not only reached into the clouds but obstructed the sun as if a colossal wall stood upon the land, its immense presence causing an oppressive feeling that suffocated anyone nearby. This was the mission location in such a place? Sir, there are people below. At that moment, Monty suddenly pointed ahead, and when Rocky followed the direction of his finger, he saw a group of people waving at them from the foot of the mountain. Seeing these people, Rocky knew the coordinates were correct, so he immediately ordered all the skyships to head there. In no time, 10 skyships had safely landed, and as Rocky and the Guard Corps disembarked, the group that had been waving came over. Looking at the approaching people, Rocky knew they must be the Forsaken people, those who lived on the land, because their attire was markedly different from those living in the sky. To say they were dressed shabbily might be impolite, but their attire certainly couldn't compare to that of the sky dwellers. Soon after, the Forsaken people came closer, and then the leader gestured for the others to stop, approaching Rocky and his group alone. N/O/vel/B/C///OM. Excuse me, are you the Thunderhawk mercenary group? The Thunderhawk mercenary group was a name Rocky came up with when he needed to provide a name for easy contact while accepting missions at the mercenary guild. Yes, I am the leader. With that confirmation, Rocky also stepped forward, walking towards the other party. Hello, my name is Lin Feng. I am the soldier captain of Backhill Village. Welcome to our village. When Rocky approached, the leader among the Forsaken people smiled and said, "This robust man, named Lin Feng, was about 30 years old, dressed in clothes sewn from beast hides, and had a very sturdy figure, giving off a highly reliable impression at first glance. Hello, my name is Rocky. I am the leader of the Thunderhawk mercenary group." Nodding at Lin Feng, Rocky also gave a brief introduction of himself. During his introduction, Lin Feng appraised him from top to bottom, continuously nodding his head. Rocky was not surprised by this behavior, since he was wearing an impressive void magic armor, which explained Lin Feng's thorough looking over. However, Lin Feng then could hardly hide his excitement as he said, "Leader, I did not expect you to have 10 floating warships. Now I am relieved." So he wasn't looking at him at all. Rocky felt awkward as it turned out that Lin Feng was not looking at him, but the 10 skyships behind him, and was only satisfied with the skyships. Of course, this was not surprising. The biggest reliance for Rocky to complete this mission was neither his void magic armor nor the Guard Corps of Thunderhawk City, but precisely these 10 floating warships. In any battle against demons, the floating warship played an extremely important role because the magic cannons on the skyships were immensely powerful. Thus, with a sufficient number of warships, even demons couldn't withstand the barrage of magic cannons. So, seeing that Rocky had brought 10 floating warships, Lin Feng was naturally overjoyed, to the extent that he overlooked Rocky's presence. "Leader, follow me to the village. The village chief is waiting for you," Lin Feng said. After a brief introduction, Lin Feng wasted no time directing Rocky and his group towards Backhill Village, as that was the real location of their mission. As they made their way to Backhill Village, they talked while walking, and through this conversation, Rocky also learned about the region they had come to. The place they were currently in was called Carlson Wasteland. The towering peak that took everyone's breath away was known as Skybreaker Peak, and Lin Feng's village lived at the foot of that mountain. Rocky was actually very curious about Backhill Village, as mentioned by Lin Feng. Since crossing over, he had always lived in Sky City and had never seen how people on the land lived. However, when he finally saw Backhill Village under Lin Feng's guidance, he was completely dumbfounded, for this was no ordinary village, but more like a small fortress. The location of Backhill Village is not actually at the base of the mountain, but inside Skybreaker Peak. As mentioned before, Skybreaker Peak does not only tower into the clouds, but the entire mountain is made up of cliffs, giving it a sharp appearance. However, at the base of Broken Mountain Peak, there is a huge crack which splits the steep cliff walls in two from bottom to top, and Backhill Village is situated within this crack. The village in the rift is surrounded by mountains on 3 sides with only one entrance and exit, which essentially serves as a natural barrier. Furthermore, they build a high wall at the crack in the cliff, making it feel as if the crack had been patched up. As a result, Backhill Village became a settlement completely hidden within Skybreaker Peak. Unless the demons could break through the high walls at the entrance, they wouldn't be able to harm the villagers. This natural terrain allowed Backhill Village to exist for over 100 years. The village was not only there before the demon invasion, but also survived the 100 years after demons occupied the land. So, when Lin Feng arrived at the entrance of the village with Rocky and the others, they saw a high wall over 10 meters tall made of stone, flanked by 2 tower structures, manned by villagers. As they approached the wall, Lin Feng shouted to the people above, "Open the gate. The Thunderhawk mercenary group has arrived." Following his call, the gates in the high wall slowly opened, and Rocky and his party finally entered Backhill Village. Walking into the village, Rocky immediately noticed rows and rows of simple houses. These modest dwellings were all no more than 2 stories tall. The better ones were made of stone, but most were wooden structures, not only plain but also seemingly very frail. These houses were built a few months ago. Noticing Rocky's gaze and sensing his confusion, Lin Feng explained, "Despite being surrounded by mountains and having high walls for defense, we often suffer demon attacks. That's why we use wood to build our houses. They can be quickly reconstructed even if destroyed." Oh! Lin Feng's explanation made Rocky nod, and he couldn't help but look back at the high wall they had passed, indeed noticing that the colors of the stones on the wall were different, clearly the result of multiple repairs. This meant that even with its natural terrain and fortifications akin to a small fortress, Backhill Village still could not hold back the demon's onslaught. No wonder they spent money to hire a mercenary group for assistance and defense. "Come, I'll take you to meet the village elder. Then take your people to the camp so we can discuss defense strategies." After saying this, Lin Feng strode forward, and Rocky told Lilia and the others to wait in the village while he followed Lin Feng alone. That in/o/vel/b/forward/c/om. The village elder's residence was in the very center of the village, yet it was nothing special and seemed no different from the other villagers' homes. As for the elder himself, he was quite old, looking to be around 70 or 80 with wrinkles on his face that told of the many hardships he had endured. "Commander, I'm very pleased to meet you." Upon meeting Rocky, the village elder was extremely cordial, even personally pouring him a glass of water. "You are too kind, village elder. Please just call me Rocky," Rocky said as he took the glass of water from the elder and sat down with him and Lin Feng. "Commander Rocky, no need for formalities with me. Just call me Old Jack," the elder said with a smile, waving his hand at Rocky after a brief self-introduction, and then asking, "May I ask how many people you've brought with you this time?" Old Jack went straight to the point without much small talk. 10 floating battleships, 180 warriors, with an average level of 2nd level among the warriors. This includes 1 3rd-level warrior and 1 5th-level warrior, plus myself, Rocky replied without any concealment, aware that Old Jack was confirming whether his force met their requirements for verification with the mercenary guild. Sure enough, after hearing Rocky's words, Old Jack glanced at Lin Feng, and upon seeing Lin Feng's slight nod, he broke into a smile. "If that's the case, Commander Rocky completely meets our requirements. I'll confirm with the mercenary guild right now." After Lin Feng confirmed that Rocky wasn't lying, Old Jack made the confirmation with the mercenary guild right in front of him. And as Old Jack finished confirming with the mercenary guild, it also signified that Rocky's mission had officially begun. "Lin Feng, you take Commander Rocky to the encampment," Old Jack said after confirming the task. Then he turned to Rocky. "Commander Rocky, your team members will be staying at the encampment these days. Then discuss with Lin Feng as soon as possible on how to defend." "Okay." Having agreed, Rocky left Old Jack's residence with Lin Feng and promptly led everyone to the encampment within the village. Actually, calling it an encampment was a bit of a stretch. It was really just an open space. There was a row of crude tents on the open ground, clearly prepared as accommodations for Rocky and his team. For such a simple living arrangement, Rocky naturally wouldn't mind, as he could see that Backhill Village had very limited conditions, and being able to arrange such a place for them was already very good. Besides, they weren't here to stay for long. They could endure it for a month. Upon arriving at the encampment, Rocky gave some instructions to the guards, and once everything was mostly settled, he took Lilia and Monty with Lin Feng to his home to discuss the details of the mission. Rocky's main task this time was to coordinate with the villagers of Backhill Village in their defense. Defense against what? Naturally, it was to protect against the attacks of demons. According to Lin Feng, the main source of income for Backhill Village was mining. There was a vein inside Skybreaker Peak, and every quarter the villagers would delve into the vein to mine. It was precisely because of the need to mine that Backhill Village required Rocky and others to assist in defense. The number of demons around Skybreaker Peak wasn't very high, and also due to the location where Backhill Village itself was situated, it was generally safe. However, troubles arose every time the villagers began mining, because there was a type of demon around Broken Mountain Peak that always attacked Backhill Village during the villagers' mining activities. Is it the black-eyed demon? At Lin Feng's home. After Lin Feng briefly explained the mission from start to finish, when he mentioned that demons attacked each time the villagers began mining, Monty interjected from the side. Exactly, it's the black-eyed demon. Looking at Monty with slight surprise, Lin Feng nodded, indicating that what Monty said was completely accurate. The black-eyed demon is a kind of low-level demon, named for its entirely black eyes. However, these demons actually lack vision. They perceive the outside world entirely through vibrations, especially vibrations from the ground. These demons can even detect through these vibrations if someone has walked dozens of miles away. That powerful? Monty's explanation made Rocky widen his eyes in disbelief. Captain Monty hasn't exaggerated in the slightest. Lin Feng then spoke up. The terrifying aspect of the black-eyed demons lies in their sensory abilities. Thus, while we may not feel the noise of mining, to the black-eyed demons, it's like thunder, which is why mining always attracts these demons. So that's the case. Then how strong are the black-eyed demons? Since their main target this time was the black-eyed demons, the strength of these demons naturally became a focal point. But upon hearing Rocky's question, Lin Feng hesitated for a moment before finally providing an answer. Well, in terms of strength, the black-eyed demons are relatively weak among the low-level demons, but these demons are gregarious. Black-eyed demons are social creatures. Upon hearing these words from Lin Feng, Rocky couldn't help but furrow his brow, aware even he knew how terrifying it could be once the demons reached a certain number. After that, Lin Feng continued. Initially, Backhill Village could still fend off the demon attacks on its own. Although mining always attracted the black-eyed demons, their numbers were not too great, at most about 10, and we could defend ourselves with the village's high walls. But starting half a year ago, for some unknown reason, the number of black-eyed demons suddenly increased. We were overwhelmed, unprepared, and our walls were breached with catastrophic losses. The same thing happened last quarter during mining, with the number of dark demons increasing dramatically, and the walls were breached again. The continuous breaching of the walls over several months led to severe casualties in the village. Originally, we had over 2,000 villagers and 600 to 700 soldiers to protect the village. But now, at this point, Lin Feng sighed helplessly, the village having suffered repeated breaches by the demons. Now, only a little over 1,000 villagers remained, and the number of soldiers had drastically decreased from the original 600 to 700 to now barely 200. The extent of the casualties was indescribable. His words caused Rocky, Lilia, and Monty to exchange heavy glances. It appeared that this mission was as difficult as they had anticipated, and certainly not something that could be easily accomplished. Fortunately, prior to this, Rocky and his group had already assessed the risks of the mission, so although their mood was heavy, they were not frightened by it. Afterward, Lin Feng introduced the situation of Backhill Village to them. With the village repeatedly breached by the demons, its strength had significantly weakened, which was why they had requested Rocky's help. Even so, the village still had 200 soldiers. Among these 200, There were 100 warriors, with an average strength around the second level. Lin Feng, serving as the captain, was the highest ranked, the only level 6 warrior in the village, even a level higher than Monty. Besides Lin Feng's 100 warriors, Backhill Village also had 50 archers and 50 mages, who comprised the remote forces. From these arrangements, it was clear that although the village did not have a large number of soldiers, its overall strength was still quite formidable, even stronger than Thunderhawk City if one discounted the skyship. Commander Rocky, how many from your mercenary group can participate in direct combat? 100. I see. Rocky's answer made Lin Feng nod, not surprised since Rocky had brought 180 people. However, due to the skyship, quite a few were tasked with piloting, so having 100 people available for combat was already significant. Thus, counting the soldiers from Backhill Village, both sides together had 300 troops ready for combat against the demons, including 200 warriors, 50 archers, and 50 mages. Calculated this way, even combined, the forces were not very large and normally would be insufficient to contend with the demons. However, Backhill Village had a unique geographical advantage, and with the high walls providing a blockade, this gave them a significant strategic benefit, making the battle relatively easier. Also, one must not forget the 10 skyships brought by Rocky. These 10 skyships were crucial in the fight, especially when facing large numbers of demons. The wide area bombardment from the magic cannons could effectively reduce the number of demons. Regarding the skyships, I have 2 questions. When the topic turned to skyships, Lilia, who had been mostly silent, spoke up. She glanced at Lin Feng. Where exactly will the skyships be docked? They're currently outside the village, but obviously they can't stay out there indefinitely, as they would be prime targets for the demons. However, I don't see any space within the village to dock them. Lilia's question was indeed sharp, as Rocky and the others had indeed arrived in Backhill Village and had found places to live, but 10 skyships were still parked outside the village. Since the skyships were an important combat force, they couldn't always be parked outside. Just beyond Backhill Village was a vast wasteland, where the skyships would become the primary targets if demons appeared. Faced with her question, Lin Feng also furrowed his brow. He indeed hadn't considered this, simply because he had never expected Rocky to bring so many skyships, and naturally, he hadn't prepared a docking space for them that n/o/vel/b//b// and c//om. Here's an idea. After furrowing his brow in thought for a while, Lin Feng finally spoke. There's an open space on the mountainside. When we trade with the Chamber of Commerce from Sky City, they park their skyships there. The area is quite large enough for 10 skyships, but with this arrangement, it would significantly slow the skyships' speed to come to our aid. Although he had thought of a suitable place for the skyships to dock, the location was relatively far from Backhill Village, making the skyships' involvement in battles much slower. However, this was unavoidable. It was better to have the skyships parked further away than to have them targeted by demons just outside the village. The second issue is that the mana of the skyships is limited. They can't support every battle, so please, Captain Lin Feng, prepare yourself mentally for this. After addressing where to dock the skyships, Lilia raised a second issue. Although the skyships were an important combat force, they couldn't rely solely on them for every battle, since their mana was finite. Lilia had realized that Lin Feng's cordiality and satisfaction were largely because they had brought 10 skyships. This was understandable, as in any battle against demons, the role of skyships was always secondary to that of the Void Magic Squad, but far surpassed that of ordinary soldiers. So Lin Feng's interest in these 10 skyships was expected. But Lilia had to remind him that these 10 skyships couldn't be deployed in every battle to bombard. Their mana was ultimately limited, and once depleted, they'd be no more than useless scrap. So, while they could rely on skyships, they could not be dependent on them. I understand. In response to Lilia's caution, Lin Feng directly said, "The skyships are our most precious asset this time. I will not use them indiscriminately. Rest assured on that point. Moreover, if the skyships are damaged in battle, Backhill Village can take responsibility and provide compensation. I can assure this. However, I also hope Commander Rocky won't be stingy." Glancing at Lilia, Lin Feng then addressed Rocky, claiming that Backhill Village could bear and compensate for any loss to the skyships in battle. But Rocky should not be parsimonious with his skyships and must not hesitate to commit them when crucial. That's not a problem. Rocky naturally agreed to this request. With that, everyone had a general understanding of each other's situation, and then they began discussing the specific details of the defense. Commander Rocky, I suggest we take turns defending. When it came to the specifics of defense, Lin Feng was the first to make a suggestion. I suggest that our forces take turns defending Backhill Village. I will lead the soldiers in defending for one day. Then you lead the mercenary group the next day. This way, we can jointly alleviate the pressure on both parties. Of course, when one party is defending, the other must also be on alert, ready to support if something goes wrong. If the number of attacking demons is too great, then we move out together. Do you think this is acceptable?
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.